So here we have DR's Fender Modern Player Telecaster, and this is, I like this guitar. I always like these guitars. They computer games next door. They're an interesting, well, nice mix of humbucker and Strat Strook Tele tones with is it a series parallel switch? I can't remember if it's coil split or series parallel, but anyway, so you've got a nice setup, nice range of sounds, and I kind of like using this on my my own T-shaped guitars. Things I noticed about this, I've had to play indoors. There's a couple of issues here. First of all, or a couple of things. First of all, DR wants a switch out of this pickup, so we're going to install this pickup there instead of the existing Fender one. So we're also going to install this little treble, no, not treble bleed, it's a tone saver, which is a little unit inside a little container here. It says its own RC network inside a convenient enclosure. It'll keep the guitar's tone consistent at any setting, so we're going to do that. We're also going to install some Fender locking tuners. However, have a look at these and see straight away that not only probably will they need the hole widening at the end here, but they also need two little locator lugs as well, which is a bit of a pain. But anyway, we'll do those, and also then switch around of the control plate so that we get the switch at the other end, and we get this switch. Everything's got a switch basically, so that's going to be a bit. It'll depend on the wiring that's already there, depending on whether there's enough wiring to just rearrange the components. So what I don't want to have to do particularly is take everything apart and try and do it back together again, even though there are supplied wiring diagrams here, and I've seen the inside of these Fender Modern Player Teles before. As you can see, that is not a massively simple little arrangement, so I want to be doing as little work as possible on that. So it's a bit interesting little project, and alongside all of that, DR has asked me to look at it from a setup point of view, which I kind of already have in terms of playing it. And what I find interesting about this guitar, there's a couple of little things. One is it feels nice to play already, and partly that's because there's no relief in the neck at all. It's been dialed out completely, so that is, well, like, you can hear the click. That is the tiniest, it's almost imperceptible. It's practically flat to all intents and purposes. Now that makes it feel low to play. But there's always a background hint of, now that's not fret buzz as such, it's fret slap because it's so flat, but you know, that's okay. So we have a couple of things here, slightly inconsistent heights across here, and a lot of graphite that's turned up in the that DR has been using in the nut slots to keep it tuning, or trying to get it tuning. A couple of things I observed straight away is that there was a lot of slack in the strings, so that just pulling them a bit like this, they went out of tune straight away. I've already done it a few times. So that'll keep going out of tune because of the slack. So we can have a look at that, improve that a little bit. Now, with regard to the action, DR wanted me to lower the action. However, it's nearly as low as you can get on a 9.5 radius. So I just measured it, and I've got, on the top fret here, I've got 1.5, which might squeeze a tiny, 0.2 of a mil better out of that. And we've got 1.6 on the end here on the low side, and that is kind of in the range of nearly as much as you'll get out of a 9.5 in my experience. So not a massive amount of room. Now, the thing that slightly struck me as a bit concerning is that this guitar has, as all of them do, come with jumbo frets, and when I take a close look at these, they're flat, or relatively flat. So these have been leveled at some point, and because I don't think any jumbo fret is really this low, because I can feel straight away that I find it a little bit difficult to bend notes. So in other words, my fingers run over the top, which is usually a sign that there's not enough room between the string. Well, it feels like it's missing. I don't know. Maybe that's just my imagination. Maybe it wouldn't feel the same way with nines instead of tens, but it feels a little flat, and they do look flat. I can see the tops of them are flattened off, certainly on the edges. So my question back to DR, which I don't know the answer to yet, was whether this was bought new and these have been flattened or levelled at the factory, or whether this has been done by a previous owner or the shop. So it's quite difficult to know. I've done as much research as I can short of buying one new myself, and so I don't really have a position to say they come out of the factory this way or that, nor can I find I don't think I can find a detailed spec as to what heights the frets are supposed to do. I mean, there's all this paperwork. It talks about components and parts lists, but I don't really think it made any mention of the height of the frets. No. So anyway, so it's difficult to know, and I've kind of searched a few reviews, and people talk about the jumbo frets, but they don't refer to any fret leveling in the factory or anything being lower than you'd expect. And like I say, I find them strangely rolloverable, and that's usually for me an indicator that the fret height is a bit lower than I would like. But like I say, I could be spoiled by that, or distracted by the gauge of the strings. But it has been levelled, and I was kind of wondering whether it's been levelled quite aggressively to get this already nice low action. Now the reason I'm mentioning this at all is because this does play pretty well, but if I were to lower it a fraction more to get a tiny bit better action out of it, my only concern really is that I don't really feel comfortable lowering or taking any more material off these. Oh, this is a USA gauge, isn't it, by the looks of it? I don't feel comfortable taking any more material off. So that's put me in a bit of a kind of quandary really. Even if I had to do a bit of fret leveling. See, and then we get into the issue of the 9.5 radius, which in my experience is you bend to the centre here and you run out because of the geometry of the thing, and I don't think really there's any fret leveling that's going to recoup those highest bends. See, that's 1.0, and then if we go down a tiny fraction and to make this 1.5 or just below, yeah, just about. Now what I do notice is the rest of these are substantially higher, and I could sort of reset them just manually for a minute just to get them back a bit more in line. So these are, the radius on these isn't set very well. I noticed you know, quite a few of them were substantially high, and you can tell that when you look across here. So for example, the distance, the vertical distance between the E and the A at the moment is significant, and I can see it obviously by virtue of the saddle, but I can also see it looking at it that way. So they're quite a long way away from where you'd want them. Now that could be, for all I know, that could be because to do otherwise you might find that we end up with buzz and whatever, but just for starters I'm going to assume that we can try and make a curve all the way across the strings. See, even that's wrong. So this is an American gauge. I can't remember the imperial size of this particular little hex thing. Okay, so that's more of an even spread, and that's still a little bit high. So there is this diminishing returns thing when it comes to setting the action on a 9.5 or below, 9.5 or tighter radius. And you know, experience has shown me over quite some time that you can end up in a situation where you're chasing your tail basically. Now you can hear with the action set lower on here now, so the action was set variously high on some of these. Now the action on the low E and A, low and high E were quite low, as low as they would go. But now, when I've set the others lower, get back into a radius, if you like, to correspond with the radius of the actual guitar, or closer to it, mapping that, I should say. What we find is that it's starting to do a bit of fret slapping because there is no relief in the neck, so it's struggling a little bit to play. So, let's turn the wrong way. Okay. So I'm going to go back, just checking these actually one more time. That may be too low altogether, but should have done that first, really. Can never do it the right way. Up, clockwise. Gosh darn it. Okay, should be there in a minute now. So we're going 1.5, just under, slightly lower than 1.5. So just under 1.5, just over 1, just under 1.5, so this one could come up a bit. So I'm trying to see how these saddles are. Have they got grooves in them or not? Interesting. Well, the crows are having a little get together. Okay, that's about where I want it. So if you ever think you've got slight fret slap, where you hit the notes and it kind of goes somewhere down there, try doing it and then gently bending the neck forward. And you'll hear when you bend the neck forward just slightly, it often cures that, which this is your way of knowing that it's a buzz being caused by the flatness of the neck, not by any fret issues. So in a way, for a low action, you're a victim of your own desires for a low action, in a sense, because the strings need some room to spin, okay, and in the middle of their travel, roughly, which happens to be about there, bizarrely, but in the centre of their travel they move most, like a skipping rope, you know, between friends being spun. So they move less here, and they're more likely to slap here. And actually you can feel it. And you bend the neck out a little bit, tiny bit, and you get rid of it. So what happens is, if you like a very flat neck, you will run into trouble as you lower your playing action down at both ends. So the lower down you go and the flatter the neck you go, the less room your strings have to move, and you hear it, particularly in the ones that move most. In this case it's showing up in the low E. Okay, hear the noise. And that's caused by a too low action in conjunction with a too flat neck. If you want this low action, you have to have a bit more relief in the neck to allow that string to move. Otherwise, or the only other way around it is you play it very quietly. You don't hit it hard, but there's no ways around it. The constraining fact is this string has to spin, and the harder you hit it, the more it has to spin, right? And the fact is that we can't controvert is that it moves most in its middle point here, which means it's liable to strike if the action is A, low, and the neck is B, flat, then a spinning string is going to hit the frets somewhere along here. A way around it is either to increase a little bit of curvature in the neck, which will permit you an overall low action or a lower action, but it will create, if you like, by the relief curve, it will create a little bit of space in here, and your action will be, in a sense, feel a little higher here, and it will feel like it's leveling out here. Or you leave the neck relief where it is because you like a sort of almost consistent feel all the way across, but you raise the playing action a little bit down here. Okay, so I'll give you a demonstration of that. Hear it buzzing at that action. If I crank that up now a fair bit, okay, I don't know what it's to, but let's call it 2 mils, something like that. Okay, hardly any buzz. Take it back down to where it was, and it's buzzing again. In fact, I can tune it by using the saddle. Okay, so it's a limitation you can't escape, I'm afraid. It's the way it is. If you factor in uneven frets as well, then you can find that a low action, flat neck plus uneven frets could also end up with the string hitting one of the uneven frets. But generally speaking, leaving that aside, as a rule, even if your frets were dead level, you're going to run out of spin room unless you bend the neck. Hear that? Bent, flat. So I hope that makes sense. So that's one of the constraints that's inherent in all guitars. Now the difference, then the other thing that comes in with a 9.5 or tighter radius, the tighter the neck radius is, the more curved it is, the more when you're bending, you're pushing the string effectively. If you're looking down the neck, right, you're seeing an arch like that, cross section. You're pushing the string up the hill, and its anchor points, if the anchor points went up with it, so imagine if you were bending the string up to here, let's say, if the anchor point was here in the G track where your E string now is, then you might just get away with it. But because the anchor is actually down here, which is a lower physical point in that three-dimensional cross section, you're actually now going downhill to this point here, and it means that it's now coming down across these strings, which means the clearance, which would be tiny anyway, even if it was anchored here, the clearance is now disappeared because you're going downhill, and the tighter the radius, the further downhill you're going. So it's why on a 9.5 or below you will struggle to get a bendable action below a certain minimum height. And experience is showing me that with a 9.5 it's sort of around the 1.3 mark on the top E, and about, well, it's not an issue on the lower E because you rarely bend it that way all the way to there. It's usually on these notes. It's usually only the E that gets into trouble. Now, because all these things are interrelated, you can also, weird things can happen too. So you could say, okay, look, what have I learned so far? Well, maybe I've learned that this is very low for a 9.5 inch radius, the action I've just set, and I've lowered it a tiny bit more. And although it what's the downside? Well, it's playing okay. All the notes play, but I'm starting to zizz out when I'm bending. I'm just about getting a tone, not without a zing. And I can't get tone and a half out of it. And I'm trying to think the only tune I play that I know, or a piece of lead guitar that I might play that has a big bend in it might be something like what is it, Another Brick in the Wall. So and it goes on the same string. Now this does it because it's on the B. So it's usually the, like I say, the E. It's usually the E that chokes out, but I have to say this has already been levelled surprisingly well, and it gets away with it on this guitar just. But any lower than that, and you wouldn't be able to do it. Now, I guess what the point is I'm saying is, for this guitar, if you want this low action, you're going to have a little bit of relief or go up on the playing action. We saw how much it had to go up by to get rid of it, and you know, it is just testable. So we're currently about 1.25 there. It's quite low, and 1.5 is my normal target. So if we went to a 1.5, let's see where we stop on this. It's hard to see when I'm just doing that. Let's say we went to a good solid 1.5, which is about where it started with. Okay, at 1.5, well, we're still getting a bit of slap. How do we know? Well, you bend the neck. Make it go away the more we bend it or raise it. So there's a question. Can you get 1.5 or 1.3 as we had it action on here without fret slap? Well, fret slap. Well, the answer is no, not with as low a playing action as this. So question is, what do we want to sacrifice? We could try a little bit of a relief alteration. I guess one of the questions is, you know, when people aim for a dead flat neck, one of the questions I would always say is, well, why? Given that the kind of limiting reality of all of it is that your strings will flap around in the middle. There's no way about, there's no getting away from it. So they will flap. There's nothing you or I can do about it. So at about 1.35, 1.4, something like that. It's a little bit lower than it was, but it's still subject to tiny bit of fret slap. Now you either live with that or you add a tiny bit of relief into the neck. So my preference would be to add a very small amount of relief into the neck. Like I say, you know, unless somebody specifies the exact opposite, you know, that they absolutely don't want it with relief in the neck at all. But you know, and now have I lost, I think I've lost an Allen and hex key. I've lost the big one. Where did that go? I bet it dropped down and fell somewhere. I bet this will also be a US one, won't it? Yeah, so the, you know, the question, it starts from a sort of, look, why do you want, you know, why particularly are you aiming for a dead flat neck? Because that's extraordinary. Okay, so to give a little bit of relief, we want to just slacken that off slightly so it relaxes and allows the strings to pull a bit of relief into the neck. Now I don't know how much this is going to change, how quickly. That's a tiny bit more, but it's minute amounts, but at least I can see it moving this time. I could only hear it before. Practically none that I can see on the upside. Okay, So we've still got all the electronic stuff to do, and I'll get onto that in a minute, but the first thing I'm going to want to do is also just to take a look while I'm at it. Having pulled an action that I'm happy with, I want to take a look at, see what the differences are on the first fret actions, because they do appear to be a little bit different. My personal preference is to go with the same across all of them. Technically, you might argue that the bigger, thicker string will spin more, therefore needs a little bit more clearance here, but I would say maybe, but it's up to you. I mean, some people like to have a different amount, some people don't even think about it. A lot of manufacturers don't seem to really think about it. So I think I've just pulled off. Oh, I have. Okay, I think this is, I'm going to stop and rearrange my magic arm because it's not working here. Look, just temporarily now I've replaced the magic arm thing, just hellfire, just because I've got to find somewhere else. I've got to build a sort of holdy on bracket out of wood and put it somewhere where I get the best range of positions, but right now it's a bit making it up as I go along. So you know, I can move it around, and I can sort of spin it around that way too. I mean, it is a good little tool, but right now it's sort of facing here-ish, which is where ish the guitar-ish is going to come back. I moved it, made a point of moving it straight out of the way. Anyway, okay, so coming back to here, I suppose I can move the arm, but I have to move the Velcro. It's nice and fine. It's a new angle anyway. It's a new angle. Okay, so I think what we might find first and foremost, we can see the nut slots have been cut down, and some of them are just about barely right. And some of them probably a bit too low, so I'm just going to get my various bits and pieces just to ensure things are kind of, there's room for things to move. Just a close up look. So the first thing is they look deep, these slots look too deep, and as a result the strings tend to stick. Now what I tend to do is I just use a V-notch file to open it up. So the point being is, no matter where the string sits at the bottom, at least above it, it's widening out. Okay, so I'm careful not to go any lower than I want to go. And this is pretty much on the mark for that string, but what I want to do is just to make sure that at the bottom of the slot is the height is set by cutting the last little bit with that file there, which is perfect, spot on. Now I think these are cut too low, in which case, if they are, we may be looking at, if it's too bad, we might have to replace just on the mark. And this should be okay actually, shouldn't be too much wrong with this as long as it stays wide enough to not trap the string. So one thing it's tractor day. There are tractors going off in our village today. It's been a tractor sort of exhibition day. Now this is 0.3, and I think these are close to 0.25, some of these. I mean, they are still 0.3 because it's ringing out, but it's almost not. So not going to do anything else for that one. Just hoping that it's widened the slot just that little bit. They don't look too bad actually, even though there could be. And that's on the mark. It's on the mark. Feels very low, but it's just on the mark. It means the other ones are slightly off if this one's good. The other ones that side are a little bit high still. So again, because it's got all this fabulous graphite in there, it also helps me a little bit because I can see that I'm not yet at the bottom of the slot. so I can widen it without any risk of over deepening it, which I don't want to do. Okay. Now I'm just going to pull these off. Now I recognise too that at the moment these strings are not being constrained by string trees, which DR has taken off. Where we put these locking tuners on, I think they've got staggered different height posts so that we'll see slightly different angles hopefully. I'm not entirely convinced it will do away with the need for any string trees. Now I'm just bending this down as if it had a string tree there, and I can't see this moving at all, so it's not really going to have that much effect on the final position of the string. Now this G that DR reported as being difficult to keep in tune, there'll be a couple of things that will be getting in the way. One will be the slot being too narrow, but the other one was all of these strings had too much slack still caught up in them, so they needed to be stretched more right from new. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just making sure this is right on the low mark. So this G is already higher. The first fret action is quite a lot higher than the others, relatively speaking. I mean, it's tiny in actual millimeter terms, but so we want to take it right down to where the others are to get it equal. And then what we'll find is that it will stay in tune better, but it also won't go out of tune when you press down as a result of the notes going sharp, which you often get when the first fret action is too high. That's one of the things I found quite early on, which is astonishing how big a difference it makes. So there's still room to go here, so I'm just widening a bit more just to make sure that whatever's happening I'm not squeezing in on the nut. Now people sometimes don't like the slots sticking up or the notch visible, but the point is if there's a notch visible here, which you can see, then there's too much material above the string, so the way to tidy that up is not to leave the string too high, but it's to put the string where it should be and then remove, sand file off any unnecessary material. That's what you want to be doing. Go for the precision of the placement of the string over the first fret. That's a critical thing. How the slot or the notch looks at this stage is irrelevant. I think it used to be. I remember people, and when I was younger, when people all discussing things like nut slots and whatnot, and people used to get quite obsessive about, there we go, that'll do me, the tidiness. They want the perfect slot and they want the string to sit right on top of it, half, like only cupped by a semicircle of groove. The problem with that is that you could achieve it and make it look very nice, but then the first fret action was all wrong, and as a result you would very easily find notes going sharp when you played the chords down at the nut end, which you don't want at all. Okay, so I will take off some of this unnecessary material after we've done this. Now it means that the nut will be quite low level, but then when you've got the first fret actions low, then the nut doesn't need to be anything but low level. It's amazing how small it needs to be to work. And anything above it is just a waste of material sticking up, threatening to squeeze the strings and choke them in the nut slots. Now personally, I find this tusk material harder to work than bone. It seems to, like at this stage now, it seems to gather up material, hold it, and then kind of roll the little shards of material out of the slot, and suddenly you're too low, and it only has to be a fraction for that to happen. So I prefer bone where possible myself. quite, if you can get it to the right height, then it's a nice material, you know, it's a nice nut material after that, but it's just not as dependable. For my preference anyway. I'm not saying other people could have a completely different take. Okay. That's on the, basically on the kind of, on the cusp of being too low anyway. So they're all a little bit different, these. So I'm just going to run the file in there just to widen this out a little bit. Obviously I can't undo it, so I'm just going to be very careful not to go any further down. I just want to free it up as much as possible. Okay, so that's those done. Pow, and there goes my magnetic clip. In tune. And now don't forget, I've already done this several times already. Horribly out of tune. So that's the slack not working for us there. So that will keep coming out no matter how long you keep on playing this guitar. That slack will keep on eking itself out. There's quite a lot of detuning there. Okay, that is where we're going to get to with those little action adjustments. And basically, let me just push you back out of the way. Can I do this to you? Ooh, I can. Wow. You can see exactly, I haven't studied this camera view, but okay, so what I'm going to do now is going to start, get ready. I'll go off camera for a little bit because I just want to size up the tuners for replacement, and I'm just going to drop off all of these strings now. What I also want to do is I will file down, or Dremel actually, down some of this nut because it's looking a little bit shaggy now, so I want to tidy it up, but I want to reduce any of this excess height. It's quite funny to see just how much nut is there that we don't need to get a nice low action. Now, this is a through body string, yeah, through body, so I'll need to, off camera, I'll just straighten these out and keep these strings as a sacrificial thing. I'll take a couple of pictures of these frets because, again, I think these are fairly flat. Oh, they're not totally flat, but they feel to me like they've been leveled somewhere along the line, but they have been polished, so it's interesting. They're just not very tall. I don't know. This is not a very accurate way of doing it because it depends on being perpendicular, but perfectly perpendicular. Yeah, see, look, my goodness, no. It's not even a millimetre. That's low for frets, for jumbo frets, and that was excessive. It will vary between frets because this depends on how perpendicular it is to the ground, or to the it's about 0.9. That's low, and that's what my fingers are telling me. Okay, so that is not a jumbo fret. A jumbo fret is about 1.4, 1.3, 1.4 tall usually. So that's close to 0.5 millimeter. Now it seems like nothing, but it's a substantial amount when it comes to bending notes. Anyway, while I'm at it, let's show you what I'm going to do here in a cloud of tusk rubble. Where do the things live? There's one. Actually, I'm not going to use one of those. I'm going to use one of these. I've got a few of these lined up, stuck with magnets to the side of my pillow drill, so they're always ready to go. It's one of the most useful tools around. Now, when you're doing this, you have to have two hands on the case to avoid any running into any metal or anything. Soft where it's come out, just looks shaggy. Okay, so that's just a little bit of that taken off, and then you can, if you wish, you can get a file of some sort and just carefully and gently just work the top just to smooth it a little bit. And here you can obviously keep an eye on the amount of room there is for the strings to sit inside the slots still. So you have to be obviously able to do that. Right, I think that's where I'll stop with that. I'm just looking, there's a little bit of scrape mark there. So you can see whatever I'm doing, I'm sort of guiding it with a second hand. Second hand? It's really important with a file or a Dremel bit or anything like that. You've got to be so cautious, because you're always, there's always a risk of clanking into a fret or something you don't want to hit. So I'm just lightly opening those up, knowing that I'm not going to get down to the base of the slot. That's what I don't want to do. Okay, so here we have that done. Nice thing about not having to change the nut on these anyway is that they're so well fitted that you'd have to crack off the poly around there, and this is very brittle poly on these things, so the less you have to break off the better. It's very difficult to even refret these without some damage. I'm going to be very nervous about doing the tuners on here, just because as I say, the poly is brittle, so I have to make sure the pilot holes are the right if I have to drill any different shaped holes. Certainly on here I've got to get the pilot holes to the right, so I'll measure the width of these little nubbins and so on. Okay, so I'm going to go off from line for a minute, sort out the tuners and stuff, get these strings off, and then come back when I'm ready to open up the body and look at the amount of wiring that's in there and see how easy the rearrangement of the plate's going to be, but also just what it's going to take to change over the bridge pickup. One of the things I noticed about this guitar, and DR asked me, for any observations, one of the things I noticed is he had all the pickups were set really low. Now this one, it could be this one's actually fallen out of its screws anyway. Oh no, they're in there. They're just dumbed down, so it's lowered. They've all been lowered. So I would personally sort of aim for about 3 millimeters underneath the string level when fretted at the last fret. So there's a minimum, around about 3 mils to the poles of the pickups. But again, this all depends on personal preference. So I'll probably set it there, unless I hear back from DR saying he wants it otherwise. But they were all set very unusually low to begin with. Okay, so I'll see you back in a minute. So just a quick observation, sorry, taking off the tuners, just removing the old tuners. Look what happens to that brittle lacquer I've told you. So having put them being installed in the first place does that, and that stays, that obviously remains under. You can see a little bit of it there. remains underneath. There's a little bit underneath the original tuners. It just stays there. But that's what I mean by brittleness. You can see that that's what the original screw does. There you go. So you don't really have any choice with this other than to just work with it, because that's all you got. But it is notoriously brittle. Now, if I just look at the replacements we've got here, I don't know which order they're in. So these will be, I think they supposedly get shorter, maybe 3 long and maybe 3 short. There we go, 3 stumpy. Now, the idea about this is that the stumpier ones, when they're through, would the stumpy ones would stick up less far, so they would be for the strings that need the string trees on them, which would be the top 3. Hello. Stick on there for me. Thank you.
Looks funny.
Yeah, look. You remember the Fender Modern Player lacquer? It's as brittle as anything. They're just taking the tuners off.
Oh no.
It's just how that's actually not taking the tuners off. It's what happens when you put them on in the first place.
Right.
Any pressure on the screw has just cracked the lacquer. So this is interesting, because I've got replacements to go in which need widening, and they have to have 2 separate little holes added to the. I have to make 2 little impressions on here, maybe with paint or something, and then drill pilot holes. That's a bit of a faff.
Fun.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm going to do that off camera, because I'm going to do it really slowly and boringly. See you in a bit. Okay, some while later, we are at the position of having got those tuners done, and each one, I have to say, was a bit of a challenge, because I had to make 2 pairs of holes, no, a pair of holes for each one, which actually is a lot harder than it looks, since there isn't a template or anything for it. You have to kind of use the tuners themselves as the template, which means you have to kind of mark up the tuners with what's that stuff called, permanent marker, and then press them down. But it's quite tricky, because you can't actually press them down square as they're going in, so you have to try and press them square so you get the tuners in the right position. Anyway, and also you know, to get it on target, you have to make the holes naturally a little bigger than they would do in the factory, because you've got to locate them. You can't afford one to be 1/100th of a millimetre off, otherwise the thing won't go in. So that's pretty good, considering what it took to do it. Now, what I've done here is I've put the low slung ones way out here, so that hopefully the idea is that the strings that are longest and need some downforce angle thing will get pulled down right at the bottom, whereas these are sort of halfway up the peg, because they're angle sharper anyway. So that's the principle behind those tuners. So all of that's done. So I might, depending on the time, 7:30, I might kind of wrap up on this tonight. I've given myself tomorrow to finish this, which is fine. So having done the mechanical bits today, I think it would be sensible to take a break and then come back and do. I might have a look under the hood now off camera, but I'll then come back and do the welding, soldering, you know what I'm saying. On top of all of that, of course, I had to enlarge the tuner holes using this reaming thing, which is a slow process, particularly if you're working with such fragile brittle lacquer. So I had to cut it very, very slowly to get a clean cut through without, and had to do it in both directions, so we didn't get any run any risk of splitting the lacquer. So everything had to fit, and also I kind of countersunk the 2 little lug holes, the locating holes. I also countersunk those on the back, so that if the lugs were, you know, a tiny fraction off target, then they wouldn't press onto the poly and run the risk of squeezing it and causing it any what do we call it, pressure. We don't want it cracking. On top of that, I also filled the old tuner screw holes. Luckily in a way they sort of appear tucked between these new tuners, so you barely see them at all, but there's little bits of, what do you call it, toothpicky wood filling those in, glued in place. So that should all be okay. There's my spare bags, a Ziploc bag. Yeah, I think I'm gonna call it pretty much quits. I might, as I say, might take a look under the hood, get it all ready for tomorrow, and then I will come and do the swap over tomorrow. And we've got obviously some spare parts to send back as well. And these are the two string tree fillers, which are a little bit oversized. It's kind of it's on the warm side tonight. We've got a slightly warm, wet British end of summer weather, but it is unusually warm, which I don't mind. It's better than finding ourselves in early onset of winter. Sorry, get in the way there. Alright, so I'll hang her up for tonight in a minute, and then we'll come back tomorrow and get stuck into the ooh, nice. Yeah, get stuck into the electricals. Alright, see you later. Good day, welcome back. Here we are with the Fender Telecaster Modern Player, and I'm just about to realign some wires to get this thing back together in its, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, converted, reverted, reversed. So we're getting the control plate reversed, so we've gone to volume, tone, switch those, we've switched these two upside down so they'll be working in the right directions, because we're going to flip the whole plate back to front basically, which is effectively upside down, because what was there is now going to be there, so it's an upside down movement. I've also got to, while I'm at it, I've also got to connect up these things here. Now, judging by the wiring on this, funnily enough, I've looked everywhere for this GFS guitar fetish wiring for this particular pickup, and I can't find any reference to it anywhere, would you believe? So despite all of the, people on forums saying, it's pretty much the same as Seymour Duncan. No, it's not, but it's got 4 wires and no green, whereas Seymour Duncan has a green involved, so it isn't the same as, and so it's one of those things that's a little bit difficult to figure out, except I guess I've just figured that it's going to be, we've got the same colour basically on this as the previous Fender, which I don't like to trust by default, because it might not be, but there was no real way of knowing this other than to go ahead and do it as if, because there is no confirming, sorry about this, I'm just going to jump around you, there's no way of confirming it with online information. And interestingly, the Guitar Fetish site also doesn't appear to have any clear information regarding its, I mean, it comes with a piece of information which kind of, it's a little bit confusing. It names some things, but it doesn't tell you how they relate to the original thing. Anyway, yada yada yada. So it's a bit of stuff to do, and on the we've got to wire up this tone saver, which goes to we're on the volume side, so it goes to middle and edge of it's a treble bleed, but it goes to the middle and middle and left side of this, which is already populated by 2 other wires. So it's going to be, one of which is going to be this extended wire here, which is my intention now to extend and join, if I can do it. Very difficult to join 2, bugger, it's not what I wanted to do. A little tidying wire now come off and has rendered tidying impossible. It's made it worse. That's not the point of this, was it? Oh, I have to get my box out now. I was just doing this, being a bit OCD about these wires. I was trying to just keep them as tidy as possible with like sort of thingying the end. I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Just making sure the end had a little bit of shrink wrap to sort of tighten it off. I've basically pretty much run out of the correct sized stuff now. I need to buy a whole load more shrink and wrap. The thing about shrink wrap is it's dead handy and it does useful things, but it's not very flexible. So while it seems like a really good idea to use it on things like this, the more you use, the less flexible this whole wire thing becomes. So that's melted all onto there. Hot air gun would be better, but we don't have one, so it has to be this. Okay, I was trying to tidy it a bit, but it isn't perfect. Sorry, you can't see. There we are. Right, so I'm just going to tin the end of this for a split second, because I have to join that. I also need to remove this, which is where the other end of it will go. Thank you. Go on the floor for a minute. So the first thing I want to do is join this little extender, and the idea of that is to basically try to extend this blue wire. Now, having thought about actually what's going to happen here, with the fact I have to add this tone saver into this same spot, I may actually have I find myself wishing that I'd just replace this wire altogether. It sounds like some sort of helicopter or something around about here. This is where the wired up things sorting out just ain't no good. I'm just gonna hope that this will hold together. I mean, probably hold together, but the problem is it's probably too big a blob. We have got a helicopter out there in the rain. Strange. So basically I was trying to get this over here, but it's not going to want to do it unless I can find something that will prise it a bit wider, which is hardly going to happen. No, it ain't going to happen. It's the thinnest of the wires, so I probably should have just gone with something a bigger size, which means getting the box out again, which is just difficult to do. Come on you go. Can we get it on? A bit of help, maybe. Yeah, no, what I'll do is I'll try and put a little bit of extra around. I should have kept another piece out. I'm going crazy. Let's try this as well on top. Where'd it go? Let's just put it to the far end. Okay, so that will protect us from touching out on anything. And then that is going to go in there, like that. So that's the first of, basically you have to do these reconnections when you, if you change this whole thing around from back to front. Basically the wires originally aren't long enough for this spin around. I had to take the switch off and turn it around. Now I have, my small pliers are in the gig box, which is annoying. Okay, so we also have another one to extend here, which is knocking around here, and this is going to go to the switch, to earth the switch. And again, this was very short to begin with because they were side by side, but now it's become a much longer thing. Now I'm joining it, but technically I could have not joined it. Oh look, here's a piece of shrink wrap. Technically might not have joined it. I might have just gone for a whole new wire from the one end to the other. Doesn't really make that much difference, but I don't know, I quite like this joining business. So first of all, let's get that on there. And once that's done, I've got to, this is just the changing around side of things, I then have to put in the new pickup wires, and hopefully that will be the right way round from the outset. We can but hope. So, see, the thing with this, you can either just sort of hope these go together a little bit with a little bit of heat right now with the tinning they've already got, which may be a little bit on the hopeful side. There you go, that's just about done. It's quite narrow too. Let it cool a bit. So once that's done, I can put another bit over here just to seal this off, to be really tidy. So that's my sort of extra joiner there. A bit fierce, but there we go. So that's my extra ground, and that's going to go around to this blob of wire here, which is a bit difficult to reach. But I will start by going around this side as well, since I can. I mean, I could go around all manner of things, but not quite, it's not critical just yet. That's the thing, we could go through here. So, again, difficult to make it stay in one place. I've got probably too much wire, but hey. So I need to get rid of this little tag just here. Come along. Why is this not lifting off? How strange. Maybe it's still waiting for the heat to get all the way through. That's really weird, it doesn't want to come undone. Okay. From this angle here I can't quite figure out why that is. Maybe tied on or something, or hooked through something, but let's just get rid of that extra bit there, and let's just concentrate on getting it on. Hold it a bit to one side. Add a bit of more solder onto there, and then we'll add this chap to it. The only thing about this little soldering iron, I like it mostly, but occasionally you end up, your finger clicks on those little buttons and you turn the temperature up. But I have to say, so far it's been very good, including that little readout there, which is mighty cool. Alright, so that's the kind of repositioning of wires to make this thing work in reverse. Now there's a bit of fiddle to do, and I've left the sort of stumps on here so I could see. That's one thing I quite often like to do. So if I'm rewiring, so I don't forget, since I'm taking the old pickup off or something, it's not that critical, but I can see where the new pickup needs to go. So I'm going to go white to there and red to there. It's a shared terminal, so there may be a chance that this other one drops off. We have to just be cautious about that. I'm not quite ready to do that yet because I want to get this bleed and tone thing in, which is here. Now there's not much room in this place, and I don't actually know if there's enough room to put this on and have it basically sitting on top of the volume pot, and for it all to fit. I guess it will, because it's still below the level of this switch. By the looks of it, there isn't a step down in, oh there is, there's a step down. Yeah. Right, so it's gonna, okay. There's a sort of cutout to accommodate the switch. Actually nothing else really, that's really weird. It's there's a kind of a step in the middle, which this is actually taller than the other side, so, and we've only switched them around. So originally we would have the, oh, I see what they've done. Yeah, they've made the switch. They've cut the slot deeper here to allow this to be turned around. That's what it is. So either which way, the height of these three pieces are kind of below the level of the middle first stage, if you sort of get what I mean. But they've designed it so that they can turn it, because these are very tall, and sometimes, for example, if you put one of these into a Strat, a modern, import Strat or whatever, Chinese-made Strat, and you try and use something like this Oak Grigsby style switch, whatever they call the tall thing, they're too tall, and the contacts end up grinding out on the shield, which you don't want. Okay, so thing here is we have to decide where this little unit's going to sit. It's going to probably it's going to definitely sit there, and we need to be able to get the thing into there. That's one side, and then the other one has to go into the middle. So I just basically put a crimp in the end of here just to keep these little arms on. Now these arms stop it grounding out, and it's quite important. We don't have a lot of room here. There's a lot of earth wires kind of clambering around this little lug here that we have to get to, and including in here is already a pickup wire. Is it pickup? No, sorry. What is it that's come out of there? It's the volume. So yes, it's the output from the switch. Should be. I don't know. Okay. Let me just get this right. So the one position is there, which is the choice of coils, or whether it's parallel or whatever. That's the switching for the coils on the humbucker. So the two coil starts, finishes, whatever they are, go to there. They get selected, one or both, or whatever that switch does, I can't remember. But the output goes to there. So it's with or without, goes to there. So that's going to be in. So that is the output of the switch is there, which goes to the volume, which hooks across to the tone. Right, so that's the output from the switch we've just reconnected. And then the middle point here is out to the jack. This is the volume, so that's out to the jack. So we have to share the output to the jack, which it says on here. Yep, jack and switch. Yep, we just hook this up to the two. But as I say, the tricky bit is, since one of these has already got one, there are two wires in it, and one's got one. Getting these things through here is going to be quite difficult. So I'm going to put on my close-up reading glasses for this. So basically I'm going to first one, you're not going to get I'm not going to get a brilliant view of this. Oh yummy, hello sister of Morris, but don't bother coming up here because it's a bit not ideal. So I guess what I want to do is I want to get this thing in here hooked into there, but in both cases I can't get a soldering iron into that space adequately. I'm going to try my best to bend a pile of these out the way. Some of them are pretty short. I'll try and hook one or two around there, so it gives me a little bit more space to get in. So we have to get this first one just through there and in, so I don't really care about how, I just want it in to share that. There we go. Now when I've got the other side hooked up, if necessary, I can redo that. But I have a feeling that rather than try and shove this in on top of everything that's going on there, I think I might rather just add this into a kind of the lump of solder at the back. So I'm trying to put a little bit of downward pressure on it from where it's sitting here. You can't see this, I'm afraid. So that's sort of touching at the back. So rather than go through the eye, which I think might be a bit of a tall order, I'm sorry about this view, it's terrible for you. I'm going to try and just add this to the blob that's already there. Sorry, I think that's on. Yummy, what are you doing? Let's just have a look. Yeah, that's okay. Now the question we've got is we've got to make this little fella sit on top of there. Ooh, bend. Likes. And that has to. That's basically where it has to sit when we put it back together again. Now that leaves us with two more. Well, three more things. Two more things. This, basically we're going to put the bare and the black to the top here, and the red and the white are going to go to their positions there. So first off, let's get rid of the white one. Actually no, let's get rid of the red one first, which is the more complicated one. You've got my eye on you, Yummy. Don't know what it is you're doing, but for some reason this is struggling a little bit. Okay, so there isn't really much finesse about this. We just need to get these hooked up, and then we'll worry about how they sit inside afterwards. Okay, that's now popped out. What I don't know is how well attached that is. But I think that's pretty good. Good, good. And we're going to remove the white. That's barely tacked on, that. Now, as always, I recommend come in from the other side through the other way to avoid any chance of cross contamination. And then we trouble with chrome, when you're doing anything with chrome pick guards and control plates and so on, you always get this dazzle when you, especially if you're using a light somewhere. Everything dazzles, you're constantly getting dazzled. Okay, so that's those, and then I'll just put this out of the way for a minute. And the next thing we have to do is we have to attach these to here. Now, in a way, any earth will do. Well, they did actually originally go to here. You can see the stumps of the original. But I would say, rather than as for my purposes, I think I'd rather make a new piece of grounding on top of here, a new lump of solder. And the reason for that is that there's so many wires already connected up to this other blob. What I really don't want to end up doing is trying to attach these and then having everything else sort of ping out and fall out of place. And this is always slightly tricky because we've got to try and hold down two wires at once. One. Thank you. Melt it up. Good and proper. That's it. There we have it. Okay. Now that should be everything. We've still got these bits sticking up, but that's fine. I don't care about that. That's from its previous function. So we got these on to the left and middle lug, correct? Correct. Is that on nicely? That's on nicely. Okay, we've got this extended to earth the switch. We've got this extended as the output to the volume. Switch them around, and there they are. Now, this is the fun part. Can one get all of this back into sorry, we've got to go the other way now, haven't we? Dole. Now what I didn't check is, do we have enough length? Right, so I didn't check these things. So this one, we now volume is going to go further away to that side, so that's the final thing. So we need to extend this red one here from the neck pickup. Oh, which one of these two anyway, sorry. Red one needs extending. Those are going to get shorter, and the jack socket needs extending. So those are the final two, which we wouldn't really know until we tried to change the thing around. So okay, so let's take care of this one first. Nice, I like these wires they use here. They're kind of rubberized. Very cool. They only ever attach them to the top of the ring. They never fill the ring in for some reason. Not quite sure I like that personally. So I just want to extend this. I'm going to use some of this grey stuff. That's white effectively underneath. So that's all that we need to say about that much. Just be on the safe side. This just needs one core really, so I'm just going to pull this core all the way through. Chuck the rest. Afraid it's white. All the extensions are white because I don't have any other colours appropriate for it. Okay, so basically I'm going to use this to extend it, and then I'm going to, if I can, come along now, will you? There's my white extension. Yeah, so we're going to extend this, and then we're going to have to unhook the jack socket wire and extend that too. So we make just try and get a little connection there. That's the best I can hope for, at least without tying it in knots, which then makes it a secure joint, but a bit of a big bundle of wire. Yeah, a bit like that. That's useless. There's a bit of a big bundle. See if I can make it smaller. It's starting off with quite a big chunk on that previous bit. Thank you. Alright, let's have a bit of this on here to cover it up, and a bit more in a minute. just to make sure. Stay. And then a bit more. Okay, I'll just tin this. Sorry, it's working in close quarters, you know. I had an interesting message from Eddie this morning, who's dropped a Jaguar off, which I'm doing tomorrow. Fender Jaguar, but he commented on something comments I'd made about not understanding the use of the ball bearing on my DIY or my cheap home quality bandsaw, and I just couldn't work out why the roller bearing, or the bearing behind the blade, was set so that the blade would sort of run against it 90 degrees to its axis of turning, which just seemed like really crazy to me, but he made a point that it's correct, it's the way it should be. So I stand corrected. Okay, so we need to extend this somewhat. Now I've got some better, well, I've got a longer piece of wire here, which is custom made for the jack plug. What I hope, I'm just looking, is it a screw-on one? Yes. I think what I'll do is I think I'll cut this here, and I think I will. And what I'll do is I'll just unhook it, because I think I'm just going to replace the whole wire rather than try and extend it in two little bits, because it's a real fiddly thing. Now I've got to remember that this is, I can't get it out from there, can I? Right, cut it to make removal more feasible. And the problem I've got is it's buried under there. I think I really ought to go back in and get the smaller of the cutters. Yeah, the earth bit here is buried so far under there that I think I'm just going to cut it and count my losses, because it would require untangling that whole pile of stuff on top of that pot, which is a bit of a faff. They'd all come apart and then I'd be struggling. So for the purposes of this, I need to unhook this bit here, which now comes away easier, and I'm going to start with, I'll leave that for a moment, I'm going to start with this nice freshly made. I've bought loads of these 2-core wires. They come in these little pre-cut sections, or one end is, both ends are cut actually, so you can just, theoretically, if you need a long piece, you could just use them all at this length, which obviously I don't. So, but it's a nice quality wire. So what I do is I'll start with this, and I'll replumb this into the output from the jack plug, and then I'll run it out to the jack separately, and we'll take the jack off and remove that old wiring. So first thing is we'll just tin this up a little bit. So if things go nicely here, I may actually get onto the Jaguar today, which would be cool. I'd be ahead of my game. I've got loads of commission stuff to take care of as well, so it wouldn't exactly be I wouldn't be cheering too much. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to now concentrate on getting this into here and preserving the connection of this little tone saver, making sure that is still wired up. Sorry, camera. So, not very good. Oh, there's no good. You're in the way. Just want to get a tiny touch on there. put this through on there. Thank you. Right, double check that in close up. Are we attached? We are attached. It's clear of other things. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about cutting off bits and pieces. Now for a minute I'm just going to hike that out of the way, and I'm going to make a new bit of solder again on top of the pot, because I don't want the others to spring off and then to have to be contend with reattaching all of those in one go, because it's actually quite difficult to attach several wires all with minds of their own on the top of a pot. It's like herding cats. Okay, on you go. Fine. Okay, we have new jack wire, jack socket wire plumbed into place, miles more than we need. Our tone saver sets back down on there. Our pickup wire, new pickup wire, goes to there. You know what, I wish I had a little bit more through there. I'm not quite happy with how far that goes through. Just want to put it, whoa, careful. Just want to push this through a fraction more. Sorry, my hand's in the way, obscuring the view. Now this doubles back. Just aim for that. It's not the tidiest thing in the world, but the aim is I just wanted to keep that hot wire away from the two wires, just clearly separate, which they are now. Okay, so what I have to do now with this still in position, which is a bit fiddly, I have to just get my screwdriver and try, whilst holding this up, I'm just going to take this out. So a bit slow and a bit careful. You obviously have to maintain inward pressure to make sure things don't skip off and run the risk of damaging the finish. This is where beta blockers are good. You can sort of steady yourself. Okay, so really that's what I'm doing there, and what I also want to do is, while I'm at it, is shove that out through there, please. Okay, to be ready. Now, excuse me, having done all of that, now we should find a spin around of everything. It's now feasible. And we have to get things out of the way. There's a lot of wires, a lot of spare wires, which is, in a situation like this, it's why it's doubly, trebly important that everything here has to be see, is that the earth? Yeah, it is. So that pot's too far over to the side. There are little things like that. If this pot is too far to one side, it's not a problem really, because it is the earth that's sticking out. But if it was sticking out too far, you run the risk of it, if it wasn't the earth and it was the positive, it could touch the shielding and then ground itself out. Okay, so that's a neutral, that's not a problem. It's out of the way. The question is now, can you get all of this stuff, including this tone saver, compressed into that little space? Because it is not a lot. Holy cow. Gee whiz. And there's a wire sticking up there. In you go. Gotcha. Right. Now, for the sake of old lang syne, these are standard. I'm going to use the ones we just took off the jack plate. I'm just going to do them up because what we've got to do now is we've got to test first of all that everything works, and we won't be able to get a particularly good check on the tony things or the switch because we haven't got strings on, but we can certainly get an immediate take whether anything's come off or isn't working. Now what I'm going to do for this purposes, see me, see you, right, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this a live, well, turn this into a jack plug for a minute without actually attaching the physical jack. So I'm just going to cut me some bare wire. See, the thumbnail's good for that. Now this is where it always gets a bit fiddly because I now have to, let's get rid of the wire first. That's going to go away. Change glasses because I can't see what I'm doing really. Where did the other ones go? Oh, there they are. Always keeping an eye, by the way, that the guitar is balanced well enough on your bench so it's not going to fall off somewhere. Okay, so I'm just going to pick up a few bits and pieces, get them out of the way, and what we want to do is want to bring up for a minute the amplifier and the lead. I'll plug that in over here. So this is a thing I learned the hard way. If you're going to do checking, do it before you seal everything down for good, because you can identify problems much quicker, and often there can be really silly problems that you hadn't thought of. So here we have the output, and we have, let's go green earth, let's go white for the live. It's not a very grippy thing, but let's call it that. Out of the way of everything for a minute, and then we'll go green to the earth on here, and then white to the tip. Okay, and it's not a brilliant connection exactly, but we should be able to hear what's going on. So, okay, yeah, everything buzzes in this with these lights. I don't know why, but okay. So, okay, so that's the right order of things. Volume. Okay. Volume open. Let's see if I can tell. Yeah. I think it's a parallel series switch. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's working. So everything's good. Apart from that. Good. So we can move on, confident, and that we've got the basic switch around done correctly. It's funny when you're new to this, and I'm not exactly massively experienced, but when you're very new to this kind of operation can absolutely have you on your knees weeping, because strangely common sense things such as changing 3-4 things around to make them work in an opposite fashion can seem so utterly counterintuitive that you end up crying and wanting to give up and melting everything in, you know, before you've got anywhere. And it can be a really difficult and disillusioning or demoralizing process. So it's just something, my experience is it just comes with experience, that's all. You just have to do it, keep on doing it. Sometimes along the way you'll begin to work out some of what's going on. Sometimes you'll get it, you'll kind of know what to do, but like me, probably still don't really understand totally what's going on. And then what can be really helpful is to have a friend online somewhere in a forum, or in my case on the Real Life Guitars page, someone like Rickard, who can help explain things every now and then in a really simple way, and I just almost understand what's going on, which is really great. Can't say it's a deep and enduring understanding, but it's kind of close, so I really value that. Okay, so let's just put a couple of things on here. Let's put the tip on. Is this the right way around? There it is. Let's put the knobs on. These are straight pushers, which I kind of feel quite difficult when you pull them off because they sometimes pull out the little centerpiece. So there we go, look, volume, switch, tone, thingy, you know, that bit. And then we've got the two screws for the jack socket, which is the final thing in this. Now, to do the jack socket, we've got to unhook this previous one from the old wire, which is a pretty straightforward jobette. And then cut to length the other one and attach it, and we're away. I keep forgetting to order a new, should I keep that bit of wire? It's always good to have a little spare bit of jack plug wire, although I've got quite a lot now with this grey stuff. So what you need is, on this sticky out bit here, you obviously need enough to do the jack plug and feed it back inside, but you don't want so much that it clutters up the outside world. But you have to have enough to work on like this. So, and you've got to be able to get up to it. So I'm just going to break the grey outer sheathing, whatever you call it, plastic sheathing. I don't know, it's funny, it's one of those habitual things. I've never been comfortable using wire strippers. I probably never got shown how to use it, and as with many things in my life, I end up kind of adapting and getting quite habitually stuck in the way I've adapted, which I kind of personally don't mind because, you know, it ends up working, being a way that works for me. But I totally recognise that it's not necessarily the right way, or I get where it's come from, you know, that it's I've obviously sometime way back in the past I've had a pair of wire strippers and I've either not read the instructions and gone and ham-fistedly tried to do things and gone, nope, doesn't work for me, and given up, or I've just had a bad experience at an early age. And so I just ended up doing it by hand, and I suppose you can get to like the feel of it. Okay, so now this is one of the funniest bits of the whole deal. The number of times I've done this bit wrong is phenomenal. So I have to talk to myself while I'm doing it, right? So looky, I'm going to do the earthy bit. Look, there's the earthy bit. The ground is going to go to the outside. Yes, it is. Look, I'm going to go through here. Actually, I don't really need as much wire as this, but I'll push it through. I'm going to go through here. Now, what's really annoying is I've just made myself a job of work, which I didn't really want to have to do. So let's just undo that. Given that I've just said that my small pliers, small cutters are inside, the last thing I want to be doing is shoving miles of wire through that I have to cut. So better to cut in front, as it were, cut first, worry later. Okay, so now go back with my left-handed approach to soldering. Yeah, but yes, this whole thing of kind of reversing things, it can absolutely do one's head in when you're starting out, and I can remember many a time just sort of ending up weeping, throwing everything away and starting again. And in a way, that's part of the, I suppose, a good part of the learning process, that you give up and you go back to the basics, and I guess that way you learn what's going on. But it would be nicer in some ways not to have to go through that expense, if nothing else. But it's a mysterious world, and I get the feeling that maybe it's a bit like maths, you know, you either have a head for electrical stuff like this or you don't. And you know, I have to say it doesn't come naturally to me. But in a sense it's then extremely pleasing when you do figure it out and you work out what's what. Okay, so now I've got this done. The next thing I've got to do is feed as much of this in as I can, and it's a little bit stiff, so it's not the best thing in the world to go back into its little housing. And you've got to make sure your thing is the right way around, which this isn't, because they don't always line up the same both sides. Mainly, you've got to get your cable or your wires out of the way of the passage of the jack plug. You don't want the jack plug hitting any unwanted exposed bits. And again, I'm going to trust that I've done this well, done this right, but normally it would be good to double check it before you sort of move on and restring everything and get into that part of it. Anyway, this jack plug bit, as I was saying before, is one of the ones that you can make a complete mess up, because occasionally I've done something as silly as wire it exactly 180 degrees wrong. You know, so even though I know it's you know, the bare one goes to the bit that goes to the middle lug, which is the earth, and then I go and do exactly the opposite. When faced with a 50-50 option, I do the exact wrong thing, and then the problem is then you put it inside the tunnel there, and that's the end. You kind of don't see it again, and then things don't work, and suddenly you're thinking you're tearing everything apart to try and find why this thing isn't playing properly. And occasionally in the past, the last thing I've double checked has turned out to be pull out the jack socket and have a look, and lo and behold, to my horror, it's clearly 100% wrong, the opposite of what it should be. And you know, you stare at it and you think, how is it possible that I could have made such a fundamental mistake? But it's easy to make a fundamental mistake like that. What compounds it and makes it even more infuriating is how, because it goes back in that little tunnel, sometimes you can forget, it's out of sight, out of mind, and you can forget questioning it until you've got no other option, and then you find that that's what's the actual problem, and you just want to poke your eyes out because you've wasted a day replacing every other component and getting a big fat nowhere in the process. Okay, that's just a word of caution. Always suspect your jack socket. Oh hell, what have I just pulled off there? Ooh. Okay, I never wanted to have to clamp this camera, but this thing here now is telling me, God blimey, this is a weird arrangement. What am I trying to do? Somebody tell me. I'm trying to push this back out of the way with this magic arm. Is a brilliant thing, but that's what I'm going to do today. I promised myself I'm going to build a proper anchor for the best possible camera angles. I'm going to do it with some wood. Right, so here we have the, ooh, how weird is that? It's back to front. Violins. The bit you use least, probably. Yeah, way off down there. That's good. Okay, so left over, one spare Fender pickup, one spare GFS wire, quick plug wiring. Not the most informative. One set of old inline tuners, actually very good by my book. So, and one packaging for tone treble bleed tone saver widget, and then two screws which kind of go into these string tree places if necessary, or if we don't need string trees. Okay, so here we are now at the fun stage called re-stringing. Now, this is a through body BC, so these are going in pairs, unlike the ones I usually use, which is the rotor sound, which goes sort of 6 and 4, 5 and 2 sort of thing. Anyway, these all go adjacent to each other, so we can just get them all through the back first. Now, one of the questions that DR had asked about this was whether with the new tuners we will or will not need string trees on this guitar. And I cannot say just yet. Having played it before, I can say that it wasn't bad without the string trees, and quite often I've hummed and hawed a lot of guitars I've made myself in a sort of Fender-esque neck angle. I've hummed and hawed about whether to put a string tree or string retainer or string trees onto it or not. And all but one of them, I think, or one or two, all but one or two, I have not done it. So my little my little Oakcaster travel guitars are have been done with Tele or Strat style paddle headstocks from China, and they've gone in a 0 angle into the body. Have they? No, that's just not true. That isn't true. They've gone in a slight angle, more of a Les Paul angle, because I used a tall wraparound bridge, so it has to have that angle. But as far as the headstock end of it goes, they have the classic Tele stroke Fender headstock, so technically would need string trees, but I haven't, on most of them I haven't put string trees on, and they've played absolutely fine. So who knows? Okay, so let's get these new locking. Oh wow, something's just dropped out of there. Ah, right. I think my fitting's going to fall apart. Right, I'm going to also unplug the soldering iron now, because her work is done. So here we have the locking trees. Now the first ones, we've got them. First of all, let's get them all lined up in line. That's the important thing, because that makes locking tuners much easier to use. So the first three we've got, as they're higher up the way they anchor, and the last three are lower down, which hopefully, and I can't be certain, but the idea is we're hoping it'll give us a little bit of down force, or down angle, break angle over the top there. Okay, so bring this through. Now my little technique is, technically you're supposed to be able to just push the strings through right the way off and lock them off. I drag them back that much, and the reason I do that is because it allows you more than one bite at using these strings. So for example, if something happens, not so much the case on, there's actually two reasons I do it. One is that it allows me to lock this underneath the string, so it pushes it a little tiny bit lower, which doesn't hurt. And the second thing is that it means that when you lock the strings in place to begin with, it crimps the string very hard, it bites into the string. Now if, for example, you had to take the strings out for some reason and not make adjustment, like replace the nut or something, then putting it in straight like this, locking it off, means you're crimped at exactly that point there. And the minute you take them out again and put them back on, you might get them in, but you're going to be biting back on that crimp point, and it will snap. So what I found is, if you take it back a fingernail's worth, lock it off there, yes, it gives you a small amount to lock, to wind around the post, but as you can see here, it allows me to push it below the loose bit, which keeps it low on the post, which is what we want for a break angle. But it also gives me a chance that the next time, if I had to remove this and replace them, the next time I will push them right the way through and then lock them off, and that will put the crimp bit to the outside, and it doesn't matter, it won't stress it and it won't break it. So we'll get away with an undo and restring. Do you see the logic? Just something learned the hard way from discovering that you couldn't do that with locking tuners. Now it was mainly, I have to say, something you, as a setter-upper, you find you tend to have to do it more when you're working on, if you're using locking tuners with a Les Paul style guitar with a tune-o-matic bridge, because at the point of putting new strings on is the only point where you discover quite often with tune-o-matic bridges that the bridge is slightly misplaced, and you're going to have to turn some saddles around in order to stand any chance of intonating the strings. And if you happen to have fitted 3-a-side locking tuners, which some people like, then you suddenly realise you actually can't reuse the strings, and it's a waste of brand new strings just to make an annoying adjustment to the bridge. Because the other thing about the Fender style, sorry, the Les Paul style thing is that you don't, what was I going to say, you can't just slack the strings off a little bit, because if you use the locking tuners here with the string rammed right the way through, there isn't enough to undo. You're only half a turn away from being directly in line, so you can never actually undo it, slack it off enough to remove a tunematic bridge to do the thing you have to do. So if you do have to remove the bridge to change the saddles around, you find yourself without doubt having to take the strings right out, and then you will not get them back on unless you've built in this little bit of get out of jail that I'm talking about here. I hope that makes sense, but it is it's a little £5 a time piece of useful information that I've learned the hard way. And actually even more than the money, if you're somewhere where you haven't got a change or a new set of strings handy to make an adjustment to get your intonation right, and then discover you can't get back to where you were and carry on playing, it's pretty depressing. Okay, so even with the low down thing here, the break angle over here is very small indeed. I'm going to just, you want to see this, I could try and measure it scientifically, but let's just imagine it. I'm just going to hold this up for fun, and I'm going to allow my little hands to, okay, so we are about, I guess that's about 2 degrees at most on these strings here. The proof is in the playing. I'm not sure this low down fixing point actually makes that much of a difference to get us out of jail on this, but let's have a see. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to physically stretch the strings to get some of the slack out. Now, DR, forgive me if you've heard me saying this before, and anyone who's watched any of my videos will be long bored. Anyway, long since bored. One of the greatest things I ever learned since doing this is that 99% of the time tuning problems are the result of two primary things. Basically, the inability to get it stay in tune while you're playing is the result of two primary things. First of all is the amount of slack still in your strings, and secondly is the condition or the tightness or whatever of your nut slots, and even the slightest friction in the nut slots will cause it to grab the string and you'll be momentarily or slightly out of tune. Now those two things account for nearly most of the tuning instability you'll ever find. And it's funny because people are often very keen to blame it on tuners. Because there's a solution, you can buy new ones. It's never those. Tuners have practically no role in the tuning stability. They do play a part in how easy or difficult it is to tune while you're getting the strings into tuning, but they don't have almost no role at all. So contrary to what people think, the tuners do not sort of spin on their own under load from the strings and gradually eke out, detune the guitar. They don't do that, as simple as that. They're geared. The force required to turn those gears in the opposite direction is way more. You'd have to have a tractor pulling the string to make those gears turn, or the string would break before the gears turn, basically. It's 14:1 gearing ratio, something like that, even on the cheap ones. But so the tuning stability is almost always down to the nut slots 50% roughly, and this slack left in the strings. And the only way to get rid of that slack is to do this. I mean, you could play it out if you played hard and retuned every 30 seconds for about a week. Eventually you'd probably get all the slack out of the strings, but if you want to actually be able to play this and just get straight on and play and enjoy it, you've got to pull it all out by hand. And you can hear, you'll hear how little or much it detunes between every stretching, and there'll be, when you think you've got to the end of it, there'll be more left, and we'll pull some more out with final few bends and upward stretches. But probably the best way to get it out without risking breaking too many strings is this method I'm using here, which is to use kind of hands and the thumbs and fingers to push. So you're not stressing it here or there, you're just stressing it between these points here, and that gets most of it. Now you can't quite get to the stuff from this side, but you can press down and, you know, squeeze out a bit more if there is any outside of the nut. You can't really stretch the stuff that's between the saddles down here and the string ferrules at the back, but you just have to hope that you squeeze all that out by doing some pulls in a minute. Now we'll just check this tuning again, and you see just again what I physically squeezed out. So we're getting close. Now typically you'll find that the bass strings will stretch most, or leach most slack out of it. And so what I'm also going to do now is some pulls from here. I'm holding the string so it's not kind of pulling too much against the nut, but I'm trying to get the last sort of milligrams of stretch out of it. And you have to be most careful when you get down to the thin strings. Obviously these plain ones are at risk of breaking, and you have to just be, if you're going to do this, on the plus side, see that's in tune still. And that is. Nice. We are pretty much there, and that will be stable from now on. Now that amount, that hard stretching, this left gouges in my fingers, that would never happen just by playing it, or just by leaving it hanging up in a cupboard and hoping that it kind of resets itself over a couple of weeks. Or, you know, some people will say things like, can't you tune it sharp and then leave it overnight and it will work itself out? It just won't. You have to physically do it. And in the case of DR's guitar here, this had some, as you saw at the beginning, there was some detuning that was easy to do, even when I got this. Now I'm not saying that DR had stretched this out in any particular way, but everything I was able to pull out would be stuff that was released when you bend strings or when you play hard or whatever, and that's just the slack in the strings. The other bit is, well, these slots are in any way constraining the strings, which they probably were because they looked quite deep in the nut and they were different heights and so on. While they were in any way friction arresting the movement of the strings, what happens is the string kind of gets caught up as you're tuning it, and then there's a differential of tension either side, or load either side of the nut, and you tune it to what you think is G or whatever, and then it's at G, but there's a little bit less tension on this side and a bit more on this side, and what will happen is when you bend it, it'll equalize because it will overcome the friction in the slot, and the string will then equalize forces on either side, or the tension on either side, and it will do that. As it does it, it will detune. So you'll find that bending notes or using a tremolo will cause that to happen, and that's why people blame the tremolo, or they blame, well, they very often blame the tremolo, or they blame, you know, their things like the headstock or the tuners. It isn't that. It's the nut slots and the slack in your strings. Now I can promise DR that when you get this back, this will tune up very quickly out of the box, and it will stay, you'll noticeably feel it stay in tune while you're playing it. You'll make minor adjustments for the first few plays, if at all, but you'll notice that having done this amount of stretching and taken care of the nut slots, those two things will guarantee you a guitar that you'll reach for in terms of its tuning stability. The only other thing that affects, major thing that affects tuning stability, there are little things like differences in climate. When you go to a warm gig or something, it seems like the guitar is responding to, and the strings are responding to humidity, changes of temperature. That has an effect, and you find you have to keep tuning until your guitar stabilizes. But the other major effect, the major issue that affects, it affects tuning as far as the ear is concerned, is when your nut slot aren't deep enough and your first fret action is too high. Now if it's more, I said at the beginning, if it's more than 0.5, pressing these notes down here, usually experienced when you're playing open chords with some open strings and some fretted strings, what you'll get is these have to reach too far down to touch the frets, and therefore they go sharp because you're having to press a long way because of the height of the first fret action. But these are still in tune with each other, so you tune them all up. When you press them down to make a D, for example, these three go fractionally sharp and these three stay perfectly in tune with each other because they're not being fretted, and what you get is an absolute mess of chords. It sounds terrible, and that's a tuning issue, but it's caused by too high a first fret action. That's one of the first things I learned, and I learned to set this really low so it's not only light to play, but you guarantee that you won't get any of those weirdly detuned chords. And funny enough, my experience when I first encountered this, and also having kind of seen a lot of people come to me with that problem since, an awful lot of people experience it as not being able to tune the guitar properly. Now in truth what's happening is they don't really make the connection. What's happening is they're going out of tune when they're tuning the guitar up, and then going out of tune when playing Ds. This is beautifully in tune, absolutely gorgeous. How delicious is that? But they would find it would be going out of tune like this. Now I'm doing that by forcing the strings down, but when your first fret action is too high, you get that without trying, and the higher it is, the worse it is. And so people experience that as not being able to tune the guitar, and they complain, I just can't get this thing in tune. What they mean is they tune it all up, then they play a chord and it sounds out of tune. That's their experience of it, and they describe that as, I can't tune this guitar. And then they go on a search for what to do, and they buy more expensive tuners, and then they do funny things with graphite, and they buy things and whatnot. But actually, it's the too high first fret action. This is divine, actually. Just listening to this, don't worry about that funny complementary harmonic thing you're hearing there. Let's have a listen to what the intonation is doing finally as the last stage of doing this. But anyway, I will get my smaller pliers and cut all that excess strings off as well, of course. But in terms of, it's a bit difficult to do because I don't want this, I don't want that sitting on the, I'll do that. I don't want the jack plug sitting on the floor. So I'll just do it this way. I'll tune to the harmonic. Dead on. Yeah. Might be fractionally sharp. No. No, it's on. Now also while I'm doing any tuning at this point, I'm listening for pings. Listening for pings from the slots. That's brilliant. that will tell me if anything is catching in the nut slot. So it's all of this process from kind of restringing to now is about kind of keeping an ear out for that to know that we've got it all spot on. Now the final issue, before I put this away, the final issue with this is, does this need string trees or not? There are lots of different takes on this, and different people have different preferences, and I can't really advise. It's one of those issues, there is not a set answer, right? They built these guitars with string trees because they believed that pulling the strings down to create a minimum amount of tension over the nut was important, but also to drag or pull the string down into an angle going up the nut. Now when I cut nut slots, I cut at a slope, as did the manufacturers, and to benefit from that slope you'd kind of want the string to follow the slope, which is a greater angle than 2 degrees. I cut between 5 and 7 degrees, something like that, by hand. So my honest answer to this is yes, I would put 2 tusk string trees back in here and take the angle down till it's about 5 degrees, where it's currently about 2 now. So it's not a huge amount of pull, but it's just enough to pull this. And if you think, if the slot's there, currently the string's probably like that. Okay, it's coming off the top of the nut, right? But the slot is already at that angle. The string's coming off the top of the nut, which is correct, so it plays well. What we probably want is a bit more like that, so that the string then comes off the top of that nut. Actually, it's not critical. There's nothing that says this string needs to be resting on the downward facing slot. All that matters is this string comes off the front edge of the nut in a decisive point of contact. What we don't want is the nut slot to be flat, so the string goes over it flat, or even goes like that. We can't have that. That's the front of the nut. We need the string, whatever happens behind it, the string has to come off the front edge of the nut. So providing that the angle is below the horizontal and there is some kind of clearance there, that's fine, and that's what it's currently playing as. So there's no strict need to have it. All I would say to DR and anybody else watching these things is, if you play it without and you enjoy it, and then you put 2 tusk, I would recommend tusk, don't go for the metal ones, tusk string trees. You've got tusk there, use the white tusk string trees. They're only about 12 quid a pair, 14 quid. Put one in there and drag it down a couple more degrees, another one in there, drag it down a couple more degrees, play it again, and maybe test yourself with a blind test. Can you tell the difference? If you record the two and get someone to mix them up, can you tell the difference? If you can't, then it doesn't make any practical difference. Okay, simple as that. There is enough break angle for this guitar to play, and because the slots are cut right and they're cut leaning backwards, so you do have a front apex for the string to launch off. That's the most important thing. But there is some angle there, and it's, like I said, it's about 2 degrees guesstimate. But personally, I would probably be more comfortable. Well, I cut for about 5 degrees, 6 degrees, something like that. But that's entirely up to you. And don't take somebody's opinion in a forum as gospel on this. Test it for yourself and see if you can find a difference. And if you can't, trust your own instincts or your own ability to hear it. Because if you can't hear a difference, then there practically is no appreciable difference. If you can't measure it in terms of increase or decrease in volume, then there is no practical, tangible difference that makes any difference to anybody. Okay, I'm going to cut this short now. Sorry, I'm not going to play this. Tested it out, I know it works, so I'm going to go and get it indoors ready for boxing up and getting it back to DR. There we go. So this is a fairly straightforward setup in some ways. A bit of an adjustment on the playing action here and there, getting a tiny bit more relief into the neck than was there before. It's only fractional, but it's just enough. Hardly any zizzing. A little tiny bit, but nothing. That's not fret buzz, it's string slap from a flat neck, but it gives you a nice overall low feeling. We've got the control plate turnaround mod, which means turning these two upside down, switching positions on those, so the volume's at the front, switch is still doing what it should, tone at the back, and correct positioning of the 5-way selector. Don't forget the plastic on the new what's it called? Rock. I don't know what's it called. It's called something Tron. Retrotron. GFS Retrotron. Still got this plastic covering on, so don't forget to take that off. And I don't know if you've got the thing DR, but don't forget it also needs an American imperial size adjuster for this. It's a very small one. Okay, there we are, done on the Modern Player. The only thing that's inconclusive for me, I did a bit of research yesterday on the heights of these frets, and strangely they're about 0.9 millimeters. If they're what Fender calls medium jumbo, I'd expect them to be about 1 millimeter tall, which isn't hugely tall in the jumbo world. So they're they're flatter. They look kind of big, but they're flatter to begin with than I kind of expect from jumbo. So it may be a combination of that surprise that they're not as tall as I'm used to, and the 10 strings again, which is stiffer than I normally play on something like this. But it could be the combination of those two things that made it feel like my fingers were skating when I was bending. Still does a bit, but I guess what I can't find is a definitive answer that says on a Fender Modern Player Tele Honeyburst, the fret should be X amount of mils tall. I can't find a definitive answer. What I do suspect is that because it doesn't need fret leveling, it's so beautifully level, I suspect this has been leveled quite thoroughly and in a good way in the factory, but that will have cost some of the fret height, and they've polished it out too. So, you know, in terms of adjusting the action, it's gone where I want it to go, with just a little bit of work on the nut slots and a little bit of work on the relief, and a bit of resetting the bridge positions to map the relief curve, the radius of this neck better. But apart from that, it still is a testament to how well leveled these frets are. So I think some of the height has gone in factory or retailer leveling, but I can't be sure until I know what they're produced, you know, what the actual spec is of the fret heights. Oh God, how nerdy. Anyway, there we go. A couple of little final do-ups, just make sure on here. But yeah, it's a funny one. And oh, there's a tiny little thing I'll do to double check is the pickup heights. Just make sure they're where kind of most people want to have them. And that, again, this is one of those things that you really can't legislate on. There's no set thing. So what I would aim for is kind of 3 or 4 millimeters at max, away from the strings. This one might be kind of a little high now. That's about right, balanced, and this one could come up a little bit more still. And we're kind of there. Now the issue that DR, I think one of the issues that he was interested in is when you have a humbucker like this. The previous one was very loose in its housing, and this one's much stiffer. Now one of the reasons why the previous one was looser is partly just how it was made, but also because it was set right down, and so the springs involved weren't under any tension. So as a result, it was kind of sitting, the springs were kind of loose between the top here and the little tab on the pickup. And the pickup was basically sitting, just hanging under gravity at the bottom of its travel, kind of. And when you tightened it up anyway, the springs then became compressed, and therefore as it came up it got stiffer. But this is much stiffer again, and it's just due to the way that the bolts go through the metal. I'm trying to take care of that on some of the guitars I'm building by getting rid of this hanging business, partly because, I mean, it's nice to use the hanging approach sometimes, but on the ones I'm making, I have to seat the pickups on the wood, but historically that's been quite a problem, because trying to use springs to hold them away from wood whilst fishing around underneath the underneath the pickup to try and locate these screws and then get it all pulled together. It's very imprecise, so I started using bolts and threaded inserts sitting inside the wood of the cavity, and that means that I drill on the little tabs on the humbuckers. I drill out the hole, so instead of on these the bolt is cutting into the cutting a thread into the brass of the tab. On the ones I'm doing now, it passes cleanly through that and it just sits on the inserts at the bottom, and then you pull the whole thing down into the body in line with those inserts. So it's a different approach, but this works well as is. The only thing that could be done differently is to adjust this one. That's a bit more of a pain to do, but I think this is much better balanced than it was. I'm looking at the pole pieces, they're quite differently. It's a sort of vintage staggering, which I've read, by the way, I've read a lot that says these vintage staggers are really appropriate, more appropriate for 7.25 radii than they are for something like a 9.5, which is quite a bit less pronounced. So that what you find here, if you look at them, they just, apparently you can take them off and compress them in. I don't want to do that, but so what I've got now is, if I just look at the spaces now, we've probably got sort of 3 or 4 mils. We'll be in a second. 3 or 4 mils on the base one, and then it comes up as high as, you know, the closest to 2 on this one here on the D. So, you know, it's probably an inappropriate pickup for this kind of guitar, from what I've read. So people, it's one of those kind of traditions that have carried on without any really good reason why. Sort of this vintage staggered poles was to do with the very tight original 7.25 radius. So you had to kind of effectively bending the pickup to match the curvature of the strings, matching the curvature of the radius. But it's less appropriate to put into a 9.5, and it's certainly not appropriate for a 12. So if you ever see one of these kind of featuring in a 12-inch radius, then it's out of place. It's not that it will do any harm. You just get probably a greater output from these two strings. Okay, all right, enough nerdiness. That's it, done. DR, thank you for sending it to me. I enjoyed that little challenge, particularly that bit there, and yeah, I hope you enjoy playing it. It's a beauty. I love these things. Just checking out my new camera mount here. As it happens, I'm going to do a little bit of soldering to reverse the polarity on this here Modern Player, Fender Modern Player Telecaster. I bought a new one of these because this is getting tired, without a doubt. Okay, so yeah, it's not a major issue. What emerged is when you let's move you. Oh, look at you with your new dangly arm thing. It gets right down to there. You staying where you are? Yes, you're staying put. Yeah, so when you change a pickup from one brand to another, sometimes you get a polarity mismatch, which has happened in this case. But also sometimes the information supplied with the new pickup isn't quite enough to tell you whether that's going to be, well, it can't predict that it's going to be counter the polarity of the original pickup. So for example, I don't think there's anything anywhere that says latest Fender Modern Player Telecaster pickups will work against or work opposite to excuse me, GFS, for example. It just doesn't give you that information, like kind of presented to you like that. So now this is back to front from where I was originally. So let me just get my head around this. We are going to change out. I wrote this down. Where did I write it down? I wrote it down on a piece of paper. Oh boy. Okay, so GFS, we had signal and ground. So we had red and black have to interchange. Okay. Now I recall sticking the black and the black and the ground went to here, but that has to be reworked. So we have to sort of get a space to do everything. So I don't know how well you can see, but here in our little here we've got black and ground, and here we've got the red. Now the white stays to the same place that it went to before, but we're going to have to switch around a couple of these, and that's what happens when you have to change the polarity. I how did I know it was requiring changing polarity? Well, because the in-between position, so I guess position 4, depending on which way you look at things, but position 4 with the bridge humbucker and the middle single coil ended up being a little thinner than all the other tones, which suggested the polarity was out of phase effectively with each other. So while I'm here, my more tiny, thanks man, just cut off a little extra bit of wire that we don't need. So I'm going to need to dismantle these two things. So the red's going to go over to the top of the pot and vice versa. Also, I think what I sensibly would like to be able to do when everything's kind of nearby, I suppose it would make sense to bring up our friend the amplifier, because here is where we really need to check early on whether or not this thing's correctly phased now. So too many wires, just not quite long enough. Brilliantly done. So we've just now kind of lost a bit of light, so let's see if I can get some back. That's a bit better. You should be able to live with that. Okay, did I turn that on? Let's not turn it on here, it'll just buzz away, which ain't good for nobody. Right, now I'll get rid of my phone so it doesn't buzz and upset anyone else. I've quite a bit to do, so I need to get on. So with my little thing here, I'm going to unhook this pile of stuff. So I've got to keep all of this as much out of the way as possible. This solder sucker is not being very effective, so I may not entrust it to doing much of a good job. Anyway, the point is we still need the solder on top of here, so let's just try and loose it off so we can unhook these two wires. Come on, come on, off you come, thank you. And they are separated, which is good. Now I have to get the red out of here. Again, it's nice having the bright lights and so on and so forth, but the problem is when you have too much bright lights in this environment, it gets very dazzly. Okay, I'm just going to pull that one out. Red's out. And I'm going to pull this one out too, because I think I need to reload this somehow and tidy that up. So that's a little stumpy wire, but we know where it's going to go. And then while I'm at it, we'll hope if we can keep this out of the way, out of harm's way, let's get as much of this solder up and gone as possible. I've ordered another one of these solder suckers, but quite frankly, until such a time as it arrives, we're a bit stuck without it. It isn't really doing much. Yeah. Never quite going to get this thing undone. You have to be very careful, you don't want to touch any other wires. Alright, we've got a bit of a gap there, which is good. We've got a little stumpy wire there, which is good. Okay. So what we're aiming to do now is we're aiming to go black to the switch, or the toggle I should say, black to the toggle. Come on, red. Red to the ground with the bear. God, this is like it's all connected up everywhere. Now this is sort of kind of tangled together under there. Now for the sake of just taking one more wire out of here, I could probably just I could undo this, but does it? No, it doesn't really care. It's not a priority. Let's not get Let's not get over focused on that. Now what we do have to do is get these two down together on the top of old Smokey here. And as you can see, they're slightly different lengths, so they really don't want to play ball with each other. Now, part of the challenge is to get them pressed down in some sort of way that we can then get the soldering iron out prior to that ready, and then somehow get these two pressed in together. Come on now, on you go. 350 degrees you're supposed to be. You can do it. That works. Okay. So it's the red and the bear now going to the top. And we've got to get the red and the black here back onto this first post here, and that is going to be quite tricky because this thing, first of all, now it's too long, so we can adjust this somewhat, and we can strip it and give it a little thinner aspect so that it stands a chance of getting through that little arch at the same time. In fact, we can even thin it out a little bit. This one is a bit mangled, so I mean it's a bit split apart at the end, so that might need to go in first really. So what I'll do is let's just take a bit of this off, so we've not got so much wire trying to go through the same little arch. Don't need it all, we just need some. So if I were to, let's take off this bit on the side here. So that makes that a little thinner. Okay. Now ideally what we want is for both of these to go neatly through this hole without any protest. Preferably, I'm trying to do it without adding more thickness by chucking solder on. Okay, that one's through that way. Now somehow somehow we're going to try and encourage this little chap through in the same plane, but I can see already it's a bit shaggy, so whether or not we're going to stand any chance at all of that going into the same hole is anyone's guess. Come on, you can do it. No, you can't do it. I'm wondering if this needs just the tiniest cut to clean it up at the end here. What we got? Let's try that. That's a tiny little bit to go through, but we only need a tiny little bit to get in the end there. You still see it splaying a little bit. In you go. Come, you can do it. Oh, come on. I want it above so I can actually see it going in. Well, that's no bloody good. If you don't feel very dexterous, this is just an utter and complete nightmare, this game. So I'm failing to get this into a precise enough point to go through this useless little loop. And the problem with that is it always catches on the side and then pokes its way out. So there is a hole there, but it's kind of refusing to go through the way you'd want it to. So I'm going to attempt a tiny bit more of a splice. I mean attempt. There's tons of pickup wire here just in case we need it, but I'm just trying to work with what we've got rather than make any new things. Okay, so here's a little, tiny little thread of wire. It's very, very small. Let's tin this a little bit to keep it at least stiff enough to get through the hole. Let's tin that as well for good measure. Just keep the ends together. Now we'll take the bulky bit, little bulky bit off the end of there. And then we come back round, bend this round as good as we can do, and through you go, my little friend. Wow, that's just at the edge of its length possible. That's in there, and so indeed is this fella here. So we'll pull that one up, and we'll pull this one up too. So they're both, oh come on. Don't push back, pull up is what I want. Don't push back, pull up. Oh my gosh. Do as you're told. There it is. Doing as it's... Get in there. Oh my god. See, this is what drives you mad when you're trying to do this. The tiniest little amounts of wire. Get through there. Get through there. Push up and stay where you're told. And this one won't do what it's told. Now I'm trying to use this just to help push it, but I don't want it to cut or get it stuck or anything. Okay, both of them in up close. Right. Okay, these glasses are pretty much worn out now, so I'm going to need to get some new. On you go, friend. Get on there. So that's the polarity shifted. If you leave it that way, if I had left it the original way I had it, then you'd get an interesting out of phase tonal option, which is a kind of a bit Brian May-ish or Peter Greenish, but it's not to everyone's taste. I quite like it as a single extra tone in the armoury. I find it quite usable, but like I say, it isn't definitely not to everyone's liking. Let's just put that there for a minute. Let's have some. Do you know, I've never been able to find the power easily on these amps. That's the only downside. Okay, plugged in, sound, gain down, clean, delay, reverb, nothing. That's interesting. That's what have I done here? So that may not even be the pair. See, this is what the GFS wiring. I should have perhaps, you know, I should have done this by hooking up. Whoa, steady on. So the middle is the middle, and so the humbucker is cancelled out at this point, which is really naff. Okay, so switch, that's coming out from there. Excuse me. So this is now getting complicated beyond belief, because apparently the red, we had the black to the ground with the earth. The shield always has to go to the top. The only possible one we can reverse is the red and the black, because they are listed as the ground and the plus. So this is weird. Well, we may, I can't really believe it, but it's starting to look like at this rate we're going to get stuck with This is no good. We're in danger of getting stuck with this out of phase tone, but that doesn't make any sense. So let's just think about this logically, as logically as we can. We had a full humbucker using the positives, and the humbucker was working absolutely perfectly well. I have a feeling that what I'm... oh no, this is terrible. What I may have to do is leave the humbucker as is, go backwards, leave the humbucker as is, and rework the polarity of these two. That's right, yeah, these two, because maybe this switch doesn't permit us to do this. That's really an absolute pig's ear, that is. Let's think it through. What are the alternatives? That white is the coil tap, which goes in here to the middle, which makes it work. I don't know fully what's happening inside of that switch. Switching those out, one becomes the plus. Let me just. I think right. Hold on a minute. Well, that was out. I think I know what's going wrong here. Yes, you know what? Oh, I've done it wrong. Think about it, Samuel. What you need to do, Sam, is you need that's the plus you need to switch out with the ground. That's the annoying bit. So this black has to go to the switch. Wait a minute. That is the plus, but it's a mixture of pluses. It's a combination depending on whether it's in series or not. Okay, so what am I suggesting? I'm suggesting that we reverse that back to the beginning, and these two. Okay, oh boy. Right, this is where I'm going to have to use the little helper clips to make sure we get this right. That's interesting. So that now that plays, but it won't. The switch part won't work. How strange. Okay, so that's got to come out. We were red. We have to go back to where we were, basically. Damn. So red's got to go back to the switch. This is going in. I suppose, the only thing I can think of is that it's the output. Whatever the switch does has to switch out if we're going to reverse the polarity. We don't worry about the switch part, we deal with what comes out after the switch. Come on. Oh, please, come on, you can't stick there forever. This is crazy. Look at this. It's gripping on to the top of this pot like nobody's business. Okay, so I'm gonna do a theoretical wire around, and we'll see how this goes. Okay. Most fiddly. So what I'm suggesting is, oh God, right. Well, we'll go back to the original for a beginning, because actually, theoretically, it's nothing to make the switch work. I think we have to have it in its original configuration, and it's the signal that comes out of the switch that has to be changed around, which is makes more sense now when I think about it. I hate this with the reverse polarities. It's such a change. It changes it in a way that just looks completely counterintuitive. So you're turning what's supposed to be a positive, switching it around and making it into a ground. And of course, the pickup doesn't really care. It's one kind of positive coming out of that pickup versus another. That doesn't make a lot of sense. I guess this red lead coming out of the switch at the moment, that's a positive, which then goes to the volume and then goes to the makes the noise. And if we're going to switch over these things to make them work or change the polarity so that we don't get out of phase, we need to change the final signal polarity. Now we're kind of running short on space to get this to work now, which is a bit of a shame. See if I can persuade this to go through. Get the white out of the way. I guess I'll keep my special glasses on. Keep that out of the way. Not very well out of the way. Come on, just stay out of the way. Yes, so what we'll do is we'll do a test next of taking the, see what I want, this is no good. I've got to get this thing through here, and it won't go in its current state because it's a bit bushy and threaded, so I'm going to need to tin it just a fraction to get it stuck together. Okay, now, so the issue here is the question, oh bugger, I've done it wrong again. The question is, does this black go to the switch? We haven't got enough room. Okay, I'm gonna have to do something here which is now annoying me. I'm going to take both of these out because we need to reshape all of these. Okay, so I need to bring this, get this damn thing out of here. I have to make enough room to reach the, I can't get the heat into the pot. I've got to make enough room to reach across with the black to here if we're going to change the polarity around. Now this is going to burn my fingers. Come on, just undo please. Okay, it's so difficult. This, for some reason, this iron doesn't want to transfer heat to the pots very well. Okay, now we've got tons of wire here, more than we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip out a bit of extra. I'll do it on a spot that's just been caught with a soldering iron anyway, so it's a little bit melted. Now this doesn't want to go past all of these ends here, so I'm going to cut them. Hopefully that will let me pull this over the top. No, it won't. Just cut them a bit further back. Oh, lordy, come on. Okay, might still need a bit more. So, let's come at this again. We have our 3 wires, excuse me, our 3 wires, and our shield, or our, yeah, shield you call it. Get rid of that. So, the idea is the shield will go to the pot top, full stop. Now we need the black, excuse me, to be able to reach up to here, and we need these two. So these are now the right length, which is good. So I need to cut all of these and give them all a little bit of a tinning. This can, of course, take hours longer now than I hoped. So what I'll do is I'll set it up so I can experiment with doing exactly what I surmised was the right way to go about it, which is to switch output positive with the earth, which is currently looking as, well, the two, there's the casing, what do they call it, the case ground, or the pickup surround plate ground, or whatever, which is the bare one. Oh, this is just, I cannot turn this. And then there's the black one, which is the ground in this pickup wiring configuration. So it's the black one we're going to switch out. So if it was only a 2-wire thing and you had to switch the polarity, you literally had, you know, it'd be dead simple. You just unhook the wire that you push to the switch. Say it had no toggle in the way. You'd unhook the wire that goes directly to the switch, you'd unhook the wire that goes to the top of the pot, and then you'd make one do the opposite, kind of, you know, you change them around, and it seems a bit odd because in your head you're thinking that one's special, that's got a special signal coming out of it. Well, it doesn't, it's just one end of a pair of things, and this also has a pair of things, only they have a bit extra in the middle, which is the coil tap addition. That's about all there is that's different in it. So just sort of treat it like that. Now those are tinned, and what I'll do is I'll just take the very tips off each of them so that we get as good a chance of going through any little wiry, you know, any little lugs as possible. Put those out of the way for a minute. Now in this game, this red is going to come off altogether for now, if I can do it without running anywhere close to. Come on. Oh, what? Thank you. We'll double that up for a minute, in a minute with the. We'll use some the little sort of jumper leads to test the polarity switch. Now I'm just trying to use this useless thing. Come on, please work. It's so old now, it's not really doing its job. So I'm trying to. It's not making me a. It's not making me much suction, shall we say. No, it's refusing to make any decent suction. Can I push it through? No, that won't go through, that might. It's just... No, I'm kind of fighting a losing battle with this solder sucker here, I'm afraid. I mean, it needs to be a bit more precise and directed anyway to do it much good. Okay, so going back to where we were, the idea is now we have the bear to the top, and while that goes to there, we need, I guess that should be the shorter of the lot, so that would work really short. We don't want that dangling around in the cavity. So just to make sure, we'll get a tiny bit of solder on there as well. To make sure it sticks in one go. Oh, great. That's not much use, is it? Let's unplug that for a minute. And we're going to make this work. I've got the wrong light bulb in here, as you can tell, so it's going to need some. It needs throwing away and starting again, actually. Okay. It was good for 5 minutes until I dropped it off the workbench, and then it broke. The bulb broke, and then there was nothing else I could do. Right. So what I'm going to do on this pot, I'm just going to load up a bit of solder on the edge here, and I'm going to do another little bit on the edge here, so I can do them independently of each other without things falling off, because that gets really annoying. So the first one I'm going to push onto here is where am I going to do it? Shall I do it? Let's do it here. First one is going to be the case ground, I suppose they call it. Bare wire. There it is. And cord. Now I'm going to do the two bits as previously to the switch. So the first one is the white one. It's going to go in here. Oh, of course it's got no gap, so I'm going to have to use the soldering iron to let it get through, whilst miraculously manipulating it with the other hand and not somehow getting it to stick. Okay, that can stay there for a minute. I might put a bit more solder on that in a second. Okay, so that's our first bit. In fact, I'll do that now so I don't forget. There's so much bleeding wire everywhere, and I've lost the light. Okay, that's the first bit. Then I'll cut the little extra overhang off like that. And we know the red one's going to go in here, but now for now I think I would prefer that this one wasn't fixed, because I want to attach, well, it could be, no, because when I know the right one to go in, then I want to seal the other one in with this. But thankfully, or helpfully, I'm not able to do this, push this through, because there's no gap. There is a tiny gap, but I can't seem to get it through. Yeah, come on, down the bottom. No, will you let me? No, will you let me? Hell. Wish this stupid thing would work. No, I can't even get a bleeding, can't even get enough suction on here to get that to empty out. How stupid is that? Maybe. Okay. Let's get one of my little, thank you. I seem to be hitting everything along the way at the moment. I've got a little tub of solder tip cleaner. Seems to do really good. Actually, I don't really know how well it works, but it seems to do something. Okay, so this one now, I do wish to go. I'd like it to be cooperative. That's the first thing I'd like. Of course, with my left hand, and I can't seem to make it work. Get in there, go through, please. Thank you. Okay, so that's in. Now, we have what are effectively, if I can just hold that there in place, I'll get some of these little clips out, because now what we have is effectively a bunch of different outputs we can play about with. So the first one is, this is what we're calling, the black one is what we're calling, well, what do I want to call it? I want to call, the black one typically went to there first of all, went to the pot top, but now we're suggesting that it becomes live, so I'm going to use the green for that. I'm going to send that to this point here. If I can even manipulate these stupid little clips. Oh my heavens uncle, really. How anyone is supposed to use these, I don't know. Not that one, it's this one. Okay, now that is putting what used to be the ground to the live, and now we're going to put what used to be the, or it used to be the live, there, to the ground, which in this case is probably easier to grab. There, edge of the pot. I don't know what's what at the moment. So that has changed around the polarity. Is what's coming out of the switch, that's going into the switch, that's coming out of the switch, going across to the thing. It's really interesting. One end to the other. See, I'm kind of assuming that these were the same. That was a Fender, and the white on the Fender is called the North Finish, and I'm equating it, I don't believe these GFS wiring, I'm equating, sorry, yeah, the white on the Fender went to the middle, and they're calling it, they're calling the white north finish, and the GFS also white would be north finish. Red on the Fender would be called south start, north finish. South start, north finish. Oh man. Okay, so this is in, but it's not playing anything. Okay, so nothing is playing there, so that doesn't produce anything. So that is not that way around. So if we take that off and we go that to there, we know that does that. This is what we had yesterday. That's fine. Then we go thin. So that polarity, that is definitely that. I can't see any other way of doing it but that. That is the positive going to the switch gear, and therefore it's producing the nice humbucker tone. We switch it into the middle position, and then that polarity is now out phase with these guys. And all I can do with those guys is I could try and change. This is what I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to change the polarity of this thing instead of changing both of those, which is simpler because there are only two wires, so they would be dead easy. Just take these off and flip them around for the black ones. But I'm trying to do it here, and I'm trying to see that the polarity coming out of the thing is this one, right? Which is, that is the plus. Okay, that's still working. How come? Don't understand that. How's that working? It's not even going to the switch. Don't get that. Anybody understand how that can be? No, that's right. That's a mix. Right, that's middle pickup only. Okay, so that's not doing anything. Get it, alright? So now if we change that over and we say, right, what we used to have as the earth is now going to the switch, and what we used to have as the hot is now going to go to earth. Let's put this on here, and we get nothing. Oh, pains, royal pains. I mean, the simplest way is, if I can't figure that, why can't I figure that out? I don't want to switch those around because that can't make any difference. Nothing going, that's really weird. Those are effectively, and that cuts off that one as well. So it renders that nothing. Oh, I'm confused, man. I seriously am confused. So if we go back to the original setup that I had with the out of phase, we know we can revert to that, which is no big deal. It's not ideal either. So that gives us back our tone. Fine. The out of phaseness is going to be caused by needing to switch. Right. I think, because I don't understand what this switch is doing exactly to this thing, I can't understand it practically, I'm going to hook these things up as previously, kind of. I'm going to reinstall it back to the way it was, and I'm going to now test altering the polarity of the other switches. So how about that? 1, 2 and 3. And that's 1, 2 and 3, and that's your output there. Output from the switch. Output from the switch. But the switch is a combination of all the polarities, right? So that's phase not going to change. It's these two that are going to change over. Okay, let's try and cut this down a bit in size. Maybe this would end up taking me all blasted day. Damn it. Little stubby bits now. Let's see if I can get this through here. Oh, come on, damn you. It ain't fair that I've lost my light. My light just when I needed it most. Just when I needed it most. I need you more than I... Alright, well, maybe we'll just reverse the polarity of the single coils and save myself a heck of a ton of time and effort. Right, methinks that should be hooked up. Okay, that's safely away from, yeah, that's away from the white one. That'll come over the top again, and I'll just hook this little fella down onto there as before. Long-winded way round. If I could get on the old internet and ask my mate Rickard what was going on here, he'd be able to tell me, but it's just slightly annoying that I don't quite know why the switching polarity isn't working on here. It's beastly, thoroughly beastly. Okay, so we're going to call this back to normal, including polarity, or out of phase, with extra out of phaseness included. And watch. Like you didn't know it was going to do that already. Now, here's the oh Christ! Here's the fun bit. I'm saying anything but the fun bit. So we go white and yellow. Let's just write that down so I don't get even that bit wrong. Sorry, yeah, white and yellow. White, yellow, red, and then output is the fourth one in the line. So let's take this out of here for a minute. Take this out of here for a minute. Okay. Now those are what would traditionally be called the hots, baby. And somewhere out of here we've got two different, oh my, and I don't know which pickups they're from either. Oh no, this is where it gets really a pain in the arse. Okay, I'll have to just fiddle around until I can find it. So what we're going to get now is we've got a whole bunch of things on top. That's going to ground the switch. We've got 3 black wires coming out of there. That one's going onto the top of the pot. I think that one, feeling it, is a ground, is an earth. So we've got, let's cut this, I'm never going to unglue this from here. So now we have one of the pickups earth. Okay, one of the 2 single coils earth, we don't know which one, and I'm going to have to try and find out which one in a minute. And here we have one of the other of the pickups earth. Okay, and unfortunately this is now starting to look a little bit untidy because I've got no choice. So which is which I don't yet know, but I should be able to find out at some point. So they go in pairs, alright, with this yellow and this thing here. So let's just get them out of the way for a minute. Okay, so I could probably tell with using my multimeter which pair goes with which. I really could have done without all of this extra fiddle. But the point is, now this is going to need to become, each of these earths is going to need to become, have to be extended to reach the switch if we're going to go the opposite way round to switch these to become live signals. It's just the opposite end of the pair. So we know that in this set here, white is middle pickup. So we need to find a pair that goes with that one. So I'll get my meter. Basically, I'm looking for, on my meter, I'm looking for a sort of single coil resistance, which I won't get if I don't get the right pair. They'll just be opposite or different ends of something. So middle is white. Let's try this one and this one, for example. Let's go earthy. Let's go, nope, that's nothing. So white and this one, aha, makes a single coil. Right, so now I know that this one and this one are together. How would I, what's the word? I'm going to have to extend this one. Right, okay. Those two are together. I'm going to need to shorten that one and extend. Well, no, first of all I'm going to do my test, aren't I? That's the obvious thing. So I'm going to say this used to be the earth. This is now the hot. Sorry, it's still the hot. Ow. Okay. So remember, that used to go to there. Now we're going to go to the opposite way around. So I'm going to stick this one. We're talking about the middle pickup right now, so we need this. Let's put this in middle position for now. So we're going to say this is now the earth. Let's shove it to the top of this pot here. And we're saying this one is now the live, which we're going to stick to there. Now this should give us pickup in the middle position, which it does. Now that's the solution. Brilliant. Okay, so that gives us a full in-phase sound. So it is simpler, as you can see, to switch the single coil polarities, not mess with this switching arrangement. It may not even be possible. That's one of the things with switches is if you, I don't fully understand what goes on in the middle of them, but one of the things you can be sure of is it isn't often as simple as just assuming that the thing coming out there can be switched with the other thing coming out of there. If you get what I mean. You probably won't. But right, so these things become the earths. Now we don't have to cut this back short. This is the ground, so we could put this to anywhere, but we could cut it short because it only has to get to the top of this pot, for example. So let's just do that while we're at it. Let's just cut this damn thing short. Now the other one has to be probably extended, which is annoying, but okay, so there's our groundy, and I'm going to do two separate bits of wire to the top of this pot because frankly I don't want to be messing around trying to get them to go in as a pair because that just becomes a nightmare. So this is grounded, thank you, grounded in a minute, thank you. Okay, so first one goes neatly to the top of there. Thank you very much. Should have tinned it beforehand. Why, it's so difficult to transfer its heat. Come on. Okay, so that's my new earth, what used to be the OT. And the same thing actually applies, while we're at it, applies to this fella here. It doesn't have to be very long too, but we'll just take this knurly bit off the end and then give it a bit of room. And this time I will put a bit of tin on the end. This also becomes a ground. Now we still, just as long as we know which one pairs with which, so that my thing now is red. It doesn't really make a lot of sense now because I've taken off my extender bar, which had white on it. It's no longer white, it's actually red, but we've also got red in the system already. So this is just what you're seeing here is a further complication caused by incompatible polarities. It's as simple as that. Often this won't be an issue. You know, very often the pickups will just be either of the same manufacturer, in which case they just drop in and you don't have any polarity issues. But funnily enough, I think with Fenders I've always had polarity issues. Fender appears to be opposite polarity to just about anything else. try and do. Okay, so now we know where this one's got to go, and that's got to go over the top to there, which is a bit of an ask, really, because it can't quite reach there. So I'm now in the market for a bit more wire. I'll strip out a bit of this. In fact, I'll just half this, and we'll use half for each of the pieces if we can. Yeah, just probably need to just take the whole lot off. Just pull the white out, the small inner wire, if we can do it. Yep. In. Now I have to keep an eye on the time because I have to go into town in a minute. Ow, that seemed to hurt for some reason. Okay, so I'm also going to need another bit of what's that stuff? Shrink wrap stuff, which I thought I'd had my fill of that today, or yesterday, but not, obviously not. Now, if I can make these things, if I can make them tidy enough joint, I might just be able to use that smallest gauge. I've ordered some more yesterday because it's really it's very difficult to find the right stuff. You buy a pack of this this stuff and you get all the a load of various various diameters, most of which aren't much use to anyone, to be honest. Yeah, well, I suppose they are to somebody who's doing large-scale wiring, but to a guitar tech, just about everything you get in those packs is too big, and it's always the little stuff you need, which you never have enough of. Anyway, so the idea is to get these two together here, somewhere or other. I want to do it in as small a join as possible, so I can stand a chance of getting the sheath over the top of it, the shrink wrap. So now this is rattling and falling apart. Holy caramba. It's all so difficult. Truman, it's so unprofessional. I can't work like this anymore. One assumes that that has made a join of some usable definition. That's not bad, actually. Proves it can be done. Just about. There you go. Please make it work. Cool down, cool down. We don't want the thing expanding as we're trying to shove it over the top. Oh, bugger, it always does that. Won't quite go over that little bit there. Damn. Come on. Go over it, go over it, go over it. Thank you. Well, ish. I think it's all snaggled up that end. But pretty much that will do. Okay, so what do we... Oh yes, we're going to here, remember? We're going to this good place. We'll go in from the top, downwards, and just remember the other one could do with a bit more solder on it, I think. Okay. That's good. I'm going to solder this bit a bit more, hoping that as I do so, it ain't going to fall out. I'll try and support it with a bit of a push at the same time. Thank you. Very good. Now we'll just double check this. So sorry this has taken so long. It's kind of couldn't work out that switching. Still haven't been able to work out that switching business. Okay, so we've got that one running. We've got the middle mixture. Nothing yet. Okay. So now what we have is, can't quite reach either, so we still also need to extend this one. So we've got those two anchored. This one needs grounding now with a little bit of extra wire. Same job as the last one, and then we should be on the move just to close the patient up and move on. Now this creates a little step there, which kind of interrupts getting that rubber sheath shrink wrap thing. Heat shrink wrap thing. I needed the other bit of white cable. It's not much good for anyone's colour scheme, I'm afraid, but it's the best quality cable I've got kicking around here for now. Basically, what do we call it? Single core shielded stuff, which I found a good supply of, and it's so difficult to get consistent wires unless you stick with one supplier and you know exactly who that is. And I seem to have got just loads of different kinds, so I'm quite pleased to have just got a kind that I can use consistently for a single coil with shielding is probably for me the most useful. It means you can do jack plugs, you can do pickups, two wire pickups. It's probably the most useful. And then if you need to, you can just strip off, just pull out the middle one and use the cable in the middle. And the only downside is you only have sort of one choice of one colour, which is always white in this case. But okay, so the same deal now. It's just want to just line these two up, get them to sit together as good as we can get. In a straight line, please, gentlemen. Come on, you want to do it. You know you want to do it. You know, something like that. And then tiny bit of heat to join them together. We are kind of done. Okay, and then we got the last little bit of rink wrap, and that will go into there. So we'll actually end up with 2 whites and 1 red or something going onto that. Okay, that's nice. That will just stay where it is. Okay, so again we've created a bit more wire, but we've lost a bit of the other end too. So I'm just going to add some more to here. Good. That's good. That's good. That's good. That's good. Right. So we should have things and turn that off. Right, so that's solved the polarity issue, but of course now we have a veritable jungle of wire issue. Everything hopefully shielded off or protected off as well as possible, so that we won't get any accidental ground outs and stuff like that. And it's all got to somehow fit neatly back in here, and it does. And then we just try it again. Job done. There you go. That was a nice little detour. No, yes, distraction. And we're back to square one. Now, let's just get this in. That was, yeah, that's ready to go now. Apart from that out of phase, I played it last night and had fab to play, loved it. So take it back in, give it a bit more of a dust down to remove finger prints. Clean bits off the fretboard like this. Come on. Clean the chrome, please. Clean the finger tips. Yes, amazing how grubby chrome gets when you don't want it to. So we'll get it ready to travel. Okie doke, there we have it. A little addendum. As far as that out of phase business on the switch goes, I would need to understand that better, as I clearly don't, but that's fine. You know, it's one level further of understanding that switching business. Logic told me that I would have been able to switch it around, but a bit like when I did Paul's Black Beauty with the extra special wiring, in my head I would have believed that I could have made the phase switching work with the two wire pickups, but something about it meant I couldn't. If I did the switching, the grounding disappeared. And I think that's basically what happened there. Is the grounding? No, the thing is, the pickup is the humbucker is no longer grounded, and therefore it's an incomplete circuit, and therefore won't work at all, because the switching doesn't allow for the. Oh God, I've done it again. Doesn't allow for the ground to change. It switches to positive only, but it uses two of the wires to do it. Anyway, I kind of understood why it didn't work on the Black Beauty attempt, but it's clearly something that's involved in, or is an issue when you're doing switching, when you have a switch or a micro toggle involved in the process. So anyway, it's kind of, you learn by trying, and as you could see, it didn't work out. So then the next kind of logical thing, which probably would have been simpler from the start actually, was to just switch to the polarity on the single coils, because in a way they're basically set up as easier to do that with anyway, because they're single coils and there's only two wires for each. Anyway, so that's done. It's just taken a big chunk out of the day. Still, I'm sort of slightly on track-ish. Not doing too badly. Alright, see you in a bit.